You are live.
Thank you, Nikki. Good evening and welcome to a virtual meeting of the City of Dublin Planning and Zoning Commission. The Ohio legislature passed several emergency laws to address the pandemic, including the ability for public entities to meet and to conduct virtual meetings. We appreciate the ability to maintain our continuity of government and are holding our meetings online and live streaming to YouTube until further notice. You can access the live stream on the city's website. We welcome your comments on cases. In order to submit any questions or comments during the meeting, please use the form under the streaming video on the city's website. Your questions and comments will be relayed to the commission by the meeting moderator. Please provide a valid name and address when submitting your comments and refrain from making any inappropriate comments. We want to accommodate public participation and comments to the greatest extent possible, and we appreciate your patience. Nikki, could I have you bring up the American flag? As Nikki brings up the flag, if everyone could turn their video off and their audio on and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Beal?
Mr. Schneier? Roll call. Ms. Call?
Here.
Mr. Supalag?
Here.
Mr. Grimes?
Here.
Mr. Fishman?
Here.
Ms. Fox?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. I am looking for a motion to accept the documents into the record and approve the minutes from the January 7th, 2021 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Thank you for the second. Ms. Beal?
Mr. Supalag?
Yeah. Yes.
Mr. Fishman?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Yes.
Ms. Call?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Schneier?
Yes.
Thank you again, Ms. Beal. The Planning and Zoning Commission is an advisory board to the City Council when rezoning and platting of property are under consideration. In such cases, City Council will receive recommendations from the Commission. In other cases, the Commission has the final decision-making responsibility. Anyone who intends to address the Commission on any of these administrative cases must be sworn in. The agenda order is typically determined at the beginning of the meeting by the chair. The rules and regulations of the Planning and Zoning Commission state that no new agenda items are to be introduced after 10:30 p.m. Anyone intending to address the Commission on any cases this evening, please turn your video on, raise your right hand, and answer in the affirmative. I'll wait until everyone is video on. Nikki, can you just verify that we have everyone?
I believe we do.
Thank you. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this commission?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, I do.
Thank you. All right. Right now, we are going to enter into our first item this evening. Prior to hearing cases, we have a presentation on the final report and recommendation from the Historic District Task Force. So Kim, Ms. Wade, thank you for joining us this evening. I will turn time over to you.
I think you're kicking us off.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Ms. Call, I just wanted to give a brief overview of the task force, of which I was privileged to work with for the past year, and help Kim in the presentation before the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Historic District Task Force was an objective of City Council that officially, I guess, would kick off in the latter portion of 2019. Primarily our work was conducted in 2020, and we concluded the latter portion of that year. We presented final recommendations to City Council, the beginning of this year, the first meeting of January. And Kimway has been so kind to help us with this project. It's been a fabulous project to work with. I'm sure my coworkers are exhausted to hear me say this over and over again, but it really was a good experience of taking a group of individuals that had various perspectives regarding the historic district and providing us some guidance for our historic district. And I'll try to keep this as simple as possible, but essentially we were asked to evaluate or reevaluate the idea of an area plan for the historic district, which originally had been in place in 2007. When the city adopted the Bridge Street district, they did incorporate the historic district area plan into the Bridge Street district. And council primarily wanted to focus on whether that was the necessary steps to take, or should we revisit an area plan for the historic district. In addition to that, we were asked to contemplate any other type of recommendations that we thought would be important to the revitalization of the historic district. And again, Kim has been essential in helping us guide our task force in providing those recommendations. So if you'll give me just a moment, I will pull up the presentation. Kim, I will lead you through this presentation, and if I'm not moving quick enough, you be sure to let me know.
Sure.
My
Thanks,
apologies,
Tammy.
Mr. Ray.
No problem. I get it all the time. So good evening, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. As Tammy said, I am representing the Historic District Task Force to share with you our learnings and updating the Historic District Area Plan per the charge of council. Tammy, you can flip, I think. We have studied the district comprehensively as a task force and tried to address all of the components of an area plan, including engaging with Heritage Ohio to understand best practices in planning, design, and management of historic districts. As Tammy said, we've met over the last year, and obviously it's been an interesting assignment going from live to virtual, but we powered through it. And it's been a really good process. I want to emphasize that the staff has brought to us all of the resources of the City of Dublin and all of the outside interest groups and internal divisions to the city to really understand how the historic district works and current things that are going on, and really providing us with the background information that we needed to come up with our recommendations. Next. We, as I said, conducted a 2.5-day charrette with Heritage Ohio. And again, thinking about a historic district and how best of not only the planning and design of a historic district, but also the management. And also presented to the Architectural Review Board and got their feedback into the process. Next. So as we gathered all this information, we have synthesized and crafted a wide array of recommendations, and we've categorized them into 3 main categories. One is creating an updated historic district area plan. The other is considering management options for the district. And the third is supporting kind of ongoing efforts and short-term successes as this plan is kind of developed over time. And I just want to note that for the purposes of this evening, that we're only touching on the categories. And if you go to the report, there's, I forget how many recommendations, but I think it's upwards of 80. So it's really worthy of paying attention to all of the detail behind these major categories. Next. So there's different recommendations that we've come up with kind of. Oh, Tammy, are you pushing next?
I am pushing.
Okay, so I'm just going to keep talking. So the first one is gateways, and the task force recognized that it's often difficult to really for people to understand what is the historic district and what isn't the historic district. So we felt that it was important to celebrate the gateways, and people came up with all sorts of physical ideas, but generally, as an idea, we want to look at opportunities so that when people are entering the historic district, they clearly know that they're in it and understand the components of it. The second recommendation is around streetscape. And again, the north part of the historic district, with all of the new development and investment, the task force recognized that there's a lot of great kind of streetscape being created, but really south of the district is where we felt it needed more attention. And as the process and being informed by the city, there's a lot of actually ongoing work, both in terms of creating new sidewalks, addressing utility issues, and especially on South High Street, as you all know, that we're developing plans for the kind of rebuilding the sidewalks and the street and undergrounding utilities. And so we take that all to heart, that there's ongoing work that's going to really improve the district, but we want to continue to emphasize the need to create a great place in terms of the street environment. The surprise of the task force discussion was in parking. We thought everybody that would be the number one issue. And as it turned out, nobody had a problem with parking. Everybody felt that there was enough parking, but it wasn't necessarily managed well. And how can we start to look at parking as one of the resources? And while we have enough, is there a way that we can better use it, manage it, and direct people to park in the right place? So again, parking is a quantity is about quality. Parks, obviously the historic district is surrounded by some, and as we all know, there's a tremendous amount of investment currently being made. And so we kind of recognize and wonder that's important to the district. But there's also the idea of open spaces within the district. And we have some really open spaces and gathering places that everybody appreciated and felt were very important to the district. And we'd like to see more of those. And one of the specific areas was what we call the L-shaped building. And I can't tell you the address, but everybody thought that might be a really cool place in the south part of the district to try to start to create a place, because south of Bridge Street, it really doesn't, you don't have a lot of key open spaces. The next one is or with space and parks, but the task force wanted to specify that and really reinforce the importance of that as an asset, not only to the historic district, but to the city. And as we think about development in the district and future development, and we had a huge conversation about the potential redevelopment of the school site, that we want to make sure that there's measures put in place, that there's adequate buffers, that any development has proper setbacks, that Indian Run is a treasure and it needs to be respected. And it is a key component of the historic district, and we really want to highlight that. Again, South High Street vitality, as I said before, when we started the task force, there was huge conversations about the north and south of Bridge Street, and everybody recognized that the north was getting a lot of attention, a lot of change, but the south was really that part of the historic district that is almost the most treasured part of it. And that's the part that we really wanted to make sure that is the most respected, and that we want to ensure that as we look at the South High Street area, that we think about the uses that are there, that there's ground level activity that encourages people to move through the district from north to south, and that we provide uses that are people facing, that people want to with, and maybe uses that could be on second floors, so commercial uses or even residential on the second floor. And I'll get to that in the next recommendation, which is about diversity of uses. And so this whole idea of mixed use is very important, and we want to encourage the district to still be encourage mixed use development, but really trying to get that forward-facing, pedestrian-facing activities at the ground level, and pushing the more service, commercial, and residential uses to the upper levels. Preservation was a really a long conversation, and we really pushed hard at our task force to speak their mind in terms of preservation. And I think when we came down to it is that preservation is one of the most important things. Several task force members felt that there's been an erosion to the historic district over time, that we've let things slip, and that one of the task force members says, we're going to wake up one day and there's going to be nothing historic in the historic district. So we're really encouraging that we kind of stop the clock right now and say, we're not going to tear down anything else. We're going to try to preserve and protect what we have and celebrate this great historic place that is historic Dublin. The next recommendation is around scale, and it goes back a little bit to the preservation, that things do redevelop, and there are things that perhaps that could, new development that could occur, that it makes sure that it's the proper height, scale, and massing that's really important to the historic district. And so we want all new development to really reflect that historic scale and reflect it in any kind of design standards. Connecting the district. We all know, for those of us that live in, which is I assume is most of us, that Dublin is a really well-connected community, and you can get anywhere on the great bike paths and walkways that we have. And we want to make sure that the historic district is connected to all of the other great resources around it, to the commercial centers, to the neighborhoods. And so thinking about all of those connections and reinforcing them, and where connections aren't there, to provide new connections. Wayfinding, had a lot of conversation about that. The city has some great wayfinding standards, and they are permeating into the historic district, but people felt that perhaps there needs to be another layer of wayfinding and signage that is specifically focused on the historic district and reflects the historic character of the district. And so another look at appropriate signage and wayfinding that celebrates the district, and as people move around it, they can understand why it is so unique. And even to the point of, we talked about historic markers and signs that talk about the history, and have those done in a very historic way. And then the last recommendation is under arts and culture. We know that there's already some great investment in art in the district. We want to see that continued. We want it to reflect the uniqueness of the district. And I think we had a lot of debate whether it should be art that reflects a historic environment, or can you have contemporary art in a historic environment. I think there's a little bit of feelings on both sides, that you can have, shouldn't have just one or the other, that it should be, we should let art speak for itself, and it should reinforce the district. So those were the overarching recommendations in terms of thinking about the area plan. The second point that we spent a lot of time talking about, and again, got a lot of insight from the various organizations that are already supporting the district around its management. And I've been kind of carrying this mantra that the district, the person who wakes up every morning and their prime focus is how they're going to make the historic district successful. And we don't have that right now. And I don't think I don't think our task force could come to a conclusion about what that is at this point, but we're pushing the city and city council to start thinking about how can we better manage the district. It's both in terms of the planning, the design, helping businesses be successful, helping residents be successful, helping people invest in their properties, follow the guidelines, and and again, making sure that we protect and preserve what we have today. The third overarching, I guess, recommendation is this whole short-term success. We spent a lot of time talking about education of the historic district, and about the ongoing efforts to continue to educate people about what it has to offer, and its background and the uniqueness of it. We want to see that continue. We obviously want to see that this planning gets integrated into the ongoing processes and regulations that are developing in the city, And then, you know, we were, as I said, we were extremely pleased to learn of more of and see the investment that the city's in the historic district in terms of the physical environment and new sidewalks and streets and streetscape improvements. And we want all of that to continue with the support of the task force. So I think that's it in a nutshell. We have asked council to consider these recommendations and to move forward with. I'd like to thank all the members of the task force. That they've been great to work with, and we think we've come up with some real tangible ideas in the details, which I haven't presented, that will really help the historic district as we move forward. So, thank you. Any questions? Tammy, you have any comment?
No, I just really want to say, I will say this group has been so great to work with. Jenny and I oversaw just the general structure of our meetings, and essentially we would put a topic out there and it was go, and the members just made it happen. So along with Kim, I want to thank everyone. It was a great experience. We have recently reported to the Community Development Committee, and we will continue to do so, and we'll make sure that recommendations are followed through. So thank you, Kim.
Yeah, I would be remiss not to thank Councilman Fox for her her vision for moving this all forward and being the cheerleader throughout the effort.
Every successful effort needs a champion. So thank you, Jenny, for being that champion.
I think it's important to know that the council responded to this so very favorably. And I think that we reinforced that we would not let this particular task force study, as others in the past, just sit on a shelf, and that we'll do everything we can to bring as many recommendations forward as possible, because I think that this was primarily a citywide task force. It wasn't just a handful of people that lived in the district. These folks came from the entire perimeter and area of the city, and everybody felt, as Kim said, very strongly about the preservation and the development of the district in a very respectful way. So with that kind of support by such a large group of people, I really think that this will not be a shelf-sitting project. So thank you, Kim. And I think people should know that Kim is urban planner and landscape. I don't know if it's just landscape, but I know you're an urban planner with NBBJ. So he brought a lot forward on this. And correct me if I have that title wrong, Kim.
It's close enough, and Dublin resident, so I'm looking after my community, my city.
Thank you very much. I'd like to turn the time over to the commission for any questions, comments, or discussion on the presentation and on the contents of it. I know that we all as a body are very appreciative. Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Ms. Call, and thank you, Mr. Way. I echo the sentiment and the appreciation, of course. It helps for us to see this type of material and these types of findings from this group, because it reiterates some of the things that we're considering, not just in the historic district, but also throughout Dublin. Some of the highlights in here, such as safe pedestrian crossing and the beauty of the streetscapes and preserving the green spaces, like the things that come out and shine in this report to me, I think help reiterate some of the things that we're trying to hold dear in the cases that we see before us as well, whether or not they're in the historic district. So I certainly appreciate seeing that from this perspective. And the only call out that I had for the commission's consideration was section F, South High Street vitality. It was called out, allowing promotional opportunities that announced events such as banners, displays, street sidewalk art. I know this commission has had quite a bit of discussion in the past about signage and temporary signage and whatnot. And I know we're covering that later on in tonight's agenda, so great timing. But just wanted to call that out as something that seems to be of special interest for this district that our commission should take into account. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Any other questions or comments from the commission at this time? Seeing none, I will again express our appreciation. I think that you've heard it from multiple of us this evening. This is fantastic. Thank you so very much. I know we talked about it not sitting on a shelf, but it really helps to refocus what we're looking at, not just, to Ms. Kennedy's point, not just in the historic district, but everywhere. We want to treat everywhere in a different, special way. And the historic district, you don't get the opportunities that we have in the historic district every day. And so that special level of attention is going to help us do our jobs better. And we certainly appreciate all of the legwork that went into this.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, members of the Planning Commission.
Good night.
All right, moving on to the case portion of our agenda this evening. The first item on our agenda is Heartland Bank at 6500 France Road, case 20-207 FDP, final development plan. This application is a request to reconsider a determination for final development plan made by the Planning and Zoning Commission at the January 7th, 2021 meeting for an exterior modification and associated site improvements for an existing bank on an approximately 0.82 acre site zoned Bridge Street District Commercial. The site is southeast of the intersection of West Bridge Street and Coast Road. Mr. Ridge, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. So as was mentioned, this is a request for a reconsideration of case number 20-207. That's final development plan for Heartland Bank. So as you likely recall, this is located at the southeast corner of US 33 and France Road. The site is highlighted in yellow here. It's approximately 0.8 acres in size and serves as an outparcel to the larger shopping center immediately to the south. So I'll run briefly through the case history. As you all are aware, this came before you on July 9th as a concept plan. And then again on October 15th of 2020 as a preliminary development plan. At the preliminary development plan stage, 3 waivers were approved and the preliminary development plan itself was approved with 4 conditions. Most recently, this came before the Planning and Zoning Commission on January 7th. The PCC also reviewed a master sign plan associated with this final development plan. The plan was approved. The Planning and Zoning Commission did disapprove the final development plan, primarily due to concerns with the exterior cladding material. So what's before you tonight is a request for reconsideration of the final development plan. The Planning and Zoning Commission rules and regulations allow for reconsiderations, assuming that the applicant brings forward new or updated information for reconsideration. In this case, the applicant has provided a formal letter with those items outlined. So these include information on the proposed trespass material, as well as other materials discussed at the meeting in January. The applicant has committed to providing mock-ups of the proposed trespass material and alternatives for review by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And the applicant has also indicated to provide a new rendering for each material, and this is really for reference and scale. So staff is recommending that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve this reconsideration. I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have. The applicant is also in attendance tonight, and obviously this is a unique situation. We do have legal counsel in attendance if there are any questions regarding process. Thank you.
Thank you, Chase. Ben, do you just want to give a brief introduction as to the process for the revisit of an item?
Certainly. Thank you, members of the commission. This question of reconsideration is something that is authorized by the rules adopted by the Planning and Zoning Commission that govern the conduct of its affairs, specifically Rule 10, which, as Chase alluded to, states that a motion to reconsider an item can be brought by any member who voted on the prevailing side of a motion. So in this instance, where the prevailing side was the nays on the question of approval of the final development plan, any member that voted no could make a motion to reconsider. There is a time limit for that, and the motion to reconsider can only be brought up within the first 2 regular meetings following the initial vote. So this is the last meeting at which a motion to reconsider could be heard under the rules of this commission. If there is a motion to reconsider made by a member who voted no on the original final development plan, any member can second that motion regardless of how they voted, and then the commission can debate or discuss whether to adopt the motion to reconsider. Now, adopting the motion to reconsider does not mean that the final development plan is approved. It just undoes the previous no vote on the final development plan. So that question of whether to approve the final development plan would be back in front of this body. So if the motion to reconsider is adopted, then the option that this body would have would be to, based on the representations of the applicant, move to table the final development plan until they come back actually having those new materials and information that they have promised in hand for your review.
Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome.
Applicant, do you have a presentation for us this evening?
Thank you, guys. Hopefully you can hear me okay. We went back and studied this, reported kind of our findings the last time, and we're kind of faced with how do we proceed. And my executive management team and board was very much supportive of giving it one more go. With that being said, we know we can't do it in a short period of time. We've got to study the materials, we've got to bring in the materials, we've got to fabricate the wall. And I think that will be really helpful in going ahead and moving forward with that. Mr. Subelak recommended a Prodema product, which we have been looking into since the time of that meeting. Actually really like it. So we're seriously considering that and bringing in samples. We'd like to see both of those items. Looking at both of those, you know, you guys being able to touch it, it's just going to take us some time. And so we still very much believe in the Trespa. We think the Prodema has very similar qualities. And if given the opportunity to allow the time for us to create that mock-up wall, I think that we can overcome the issues that we had with the confidence. I also wanted to take the opportunity to ask about the color and the tone, because I'm only going to have really one shot to order the material and build the mock-up wall. So it would be really helpful for us to make sure that we're headed in the right direction in terms of color and tone. I know there was some conversation about that. So really just asking for some additional time so that we can prove these materials out. The mock wall will be relatively large. We're planning on doing edges, corners, the reveals, so you can really look, touch, feel all of these details that we have been discussing since last year.
Thank you, Ms. Trout. Chase and Nikki, back to you just to run through primary and secondary permitted materials within the zone that they currently are. So if you could go through code requirements, and then we'll turn it back over to the commission to see if we have a motion.
Yeah, I can certainly run those quickly. Code essentially requires a minimum of 80% of each facade visible from public right-of-way or an adjacent property, exclusive of windows and doors, to be constructed of permitted primary materials. So these are going to be natural stone, cast stone, brick, and glass. Secondary materials are permitted to be up to 20% of those facades facing public right-of-way or an adjacent property. And I apologize, I'm trying to find the permitted secondary materials. Secondary materials include glass fiber reinforced gypsum, wood siding, fiber cement siding, metal, and exterior architectural metal panels and cladding.
Just one clarification item, the type of material, whether it's the Trespa material or the material recommended by Mr. Supelak, what would that fall into as far as the description? Obviously, we don't have brand names and that sort of thing in our primary and secondary material callouts, but where would that fall within the primary or the secondary?
So the Trespa in particular would be considered a other high quality synthetic material. So code essentially gives the Planning and Zoning Commission the latitude to approve new materials, synthetic materials, which this would fall under. And really that's to accommodate new materials, new products, new technology, so on and so forth. So this would be considered one of those synthetic alternative materials.
Thank you, Mr. Ridge. All right, at this time, I will turn it over to Commission for questions. Ms. Fox?
I have a couple of questions. I noticed that in the statement, one of the materials, Ms. Trout, that you were thinking of coming back with was the, and I probably won't pronounce this right, Nichiha. And I was curious because in the past history, you had mentioned that the architect felt that Nichiha was not going to give the kind of aesthetic or was as durable as Trespa. So if you felt that way, maybe it wouldn't be a example, that we would want to see. Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, so our thought there was because it has been brought up, we have studied it. We don't believe that it's going to be a viable option. We're going to do a much smaller sample, but because we feel like we need to get all the options laid out in front of you at one time, we felt like we could throw that out there with a rendering just to show you what we saw in our early stages with regard to tone and how it really translates to the building. So it's more of just we're throwing everything out there to make sure you see every option, and it gives us the best chance. But we don't intend to think that we will move forward with the Nichiha or any of the other synthetics. We really like the Trespa still, but after studying the Prodema, I think that's a really viable option too. So we're exploring that, and we haven't done as much work on it, but we figured why not? We've come this far. Let's give it one more go, and that's why those materials are there. And looking for feedback on any others or suggestions, because my hope is that we'll get to table this thing. I'm going to have them order the materials, and we're going to get started on this right away.
Right. So a couple of questions about that. I noticed in trying to find, and in between time, I've tried to find Trespa here in town somewhere, and I haven't been able to find it. But what I did notice was on the, and I inquired with our planning department, what I did notice was that on the facade of the AC Marriott, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your intention is to have a wood-like skin. That's at least what I saw in the history. You want it to have a sense of a warmth of wood, right? So they have on the facade of the AC Marriott, and also at behind the bar of Vaso outside, a cladding that is very pretty, that is wood-like, and it's a ceramic plank. Now, I don't know architecturally or engineer-wise whether or not that would be, if you can use a ceramic, because I know Trespa is a laminate of sort, and ceramic is a heavier weight. But I certainly, the warmth of that, the authentic reproduction of an authenticity of wood was very pretty. And I guess it kind of concerns me that you would come back with some products that you're not happy with to show us, which will make Trespa look good, when there are other options out there, obviously, like ceramic. And as Mr. Supalak said maybe some others. And then I ran across one called Rain Screen that apparently is used that has a very authentic wood look. I would prefer, if you come back, that we have some really viable options to look at and not just ones that you already feel aren't going to be good enough. So, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we did study the ceramics in the application that we're using it at that diagonal pattern and in the rendering. It really wasn't giving us that natural look, so we didn't find the right product perhaps, but I guess the intent is to really get feedback on what we would like to see so that we can move forward with that. I've been to that Marriott and have looked at that. I didn't feel like in the scale that we're using it, it didn't have a lot of grain, it didn't have a lot of texture, so that particular product itself, I'm not sure what it is. We didn't explore that, but the hope is that we'll get the feedback today to be able to go back and study and figure out what it is that we need. And if we don't want to see the Nichiha Noko skin, I don't need to put it out there. My goal is to find things that are viable, that we're willing to use, that you will also love and approve, so that we can kind of come to a place where we're getting what we need and we have the durability. So this is really just open, looking for feedback, and we can definitely take that down as well. We haven't ordered anything or committed anything. We're just open to whatever is going to make sense for the design.
Okay. And another question would be, because it hasn't been used and the architect hasn't used it, do you have any concerns about a local contractor being able to apply it correctly?
So I just want to correct that the architect has used the product. They just haven't used it locally in the Columbus market. So they do have experience. There are projects going on throughout the United States where they're using it. That application of the product is very important as well. Brusili has found a contractor who has used the product before. And so we are, part of the process of building this mock-up wall is having those partners around to do the mock-up wall so that we make sure that we get the quality of installation in addition to. So that is our intent, is to find somebody who does have experience with it.
Okay. And also, is there a warranty on Trespa? Do you know if there's a warranty?
Yeah, Trespa and Prodema, I think both had 10-year warranties on them.
Okay. And how does that compare to like a Hardy Plank or a Cementus?
I'm not sure that I'm qualified to answer that.
Okay.
I don't have Rex on the call today.
I think that's important because really your argument here is durability. It's a brand new material for us. And even though to me, this is how I feel, the Bridge Street Code allows us to permit some new materials, but I think we have to look at why we would. Other than just aesthetics, we'd have to look at durability in comparison to using a primary or secondary that we do know. So I would like you to come back with comparison warranties on a product that we know nothing about to give us a sense of how it would wear. And then my only question is that when you were looking at colors, you came back with a very light color both times. Were there discussions about other color variations for the skin?
There have been several discussions, and actually through the process of looking at the Prodema, there was not something that was that color. So since that time, we've actually revisited the Trespa colors to kind of look at some warmer tones, and in the Prodema, looking at something that's similar. So again, I think the renderings will help with that. In addition to the mock-up walls, but we're really looking for that direction. If the consensus is the color is not warm enough and you'd like to see more brown and red tones, then that gives me some direction on the colors. But we have produced renderings for both the Prodema and the Trespa, and in alternate colors that are a little bit darker, they're a little bit warmer, but we both, we're really happy with the renderings. We just like to see it kind of in the mock-up before we would commit to it.
Right. And I know it's difficult, and I'll only ask one more question. I know it's difficult to actually pick a color, like we've all gone through trying to pick a color for a wall, and we get one color and we actually go to the next one. If you do bring this back and you have a mock-up of a color that you're pretty sure of, would you also bring back any other color options within the Trespa family. Personally for me, I thought as I look back at the context of the surrounding buildings, there were many more warm tones. And my fear was that this building would stand out a little bit too light in color, a little bit not quite as complementary to the warmer tones of the surrounding. Not that you want it to blend in exactly, you certainly don't. You want it to be distinctive. But I think I would prefer to see some warmer tones. And I would be interested in seeing if Trespa turns out to be the material that you end up using, that it would be nice to see a little variation in tonages, so that, we can make that decision at final development.
As it stands right now, when we go forward with the mock-up, we are going to do 2 different color variations of the Trespa. One is the one that we presented in the final development plan, which is a blend. But we've also gone back and looked at the Milano Terra and the Harmony, and we're going to blend those as well. That gives us a little bit of variation, but it is certainly warmer. So you will see 2 versions of Trespa. And right now what we're looking at is the Rustic Prodema. So it's very similar. It's a little bit warmer. It's got some brown tones in it, but that product is actually like a real wood veneer. It's manufactured much in the way of Trespa, but it's using that real wood veneer. So you get a lot of natural variation in it. So we're looking at doing that as well. So there will be definitely some other color options.
Will it still be a golden tone though?
It's a little bit it's definitely warm with some, it's not red. It's just more of a deep brown, I guess I would call it.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Mr. Supalak and Mr. Fishman, you were both on the opposing side, so I'd like to hear comments from either of you on any questions that you may have for the applicant or items for discussion.
I don't have any questions. Ashley, I know this was unfortunate relative to the plan you guys were unfurling on the timing, but I do think even for you all, this move is the right thing. The long and the short from the I think the city side, this material is an exception, right? To the primary and secondary stuff, materials. It is generally, I think we've all head nodded favorably to the concept of this building, and we could get on board with this exception. We just don't have confidence about, will the execution match the concept, the conceptual drawings, which remains to be seen. So at a certain point, this has to prove itself out. I think this next step that you're offering, the sort of, and/or even for yourself, working towards basically a test sample whereby they can actually work on and prove the seams and the corners and the edges all around the design. That's really a smart thing. I think the other ones are, even if they're not your first choice, I think you're hedging your bet, right? What if it doesn't play out quite right? Or what if there are alternates here that we do end up thinking are better when they really get made? So I think it's all the right moves. Doing this will ultimately, it will validate our confidence or invalidate our confidence one way or another. And at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. You want a great building, not just a pretty a pretty concept on a piece of paper. So this is assuring that, and I am supportive of the reconsidering and then tabling until we see it, and then sort of closing this at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Supalak. Mr. Fishman? You're muted, Warren.
I think it's all been said by Mrs. Fox and Mr. Supalak, but and I agree with both of them. One thing I did think about when I actually pulled out our old the plans, everything from the previous meeting, and I think that we should rely on probably some people on this board and also their architect to talk about the color, so it won't be something that becomes dated in a few years. I think that requires some expertise, but I agree with Mr. Sippelak completely that the quality and durability is and how it's installed is incredibly important. So I'm in favor of tabling it and giving them another shot at it.
As I'm the last of the contrary votes from the first visit, I'll just add a couple of comments. Number one is there's always risk in being a trailblazer. So as you come forward with something that hasn't been utilized before, there's risk to that to you and there's risk to that for us. We understand that there are warranties on these different materials, and Ms. Fox, that called out the 10-year warranty, but we know buildings stay for longer than 10 years. Occupants of those buildings can come and go. And so when we're looking at applications, we're looking at applications for longer than 10 years. We're looking for, the 30, 40, 50 years for the building, and then even longer than that for the actual site itself. I kind of wish there were a way for us to prove out the material in a secondary capacity. So if there is any way to cut down on the material that brings it into the secondary application on the material itself, then that would help us to feel more comfortable. If there were, a less front and center property where we're proving out a material in a secondary capacity, that would give us greater comfort. If there are any other businesses that are using material, it is very difficult to come forward to make a decision to use an untested product in a high visibility site as a primary material. So that's like three strikes almost, which is where I think you heard our concern from the last time. I am also not opposed to tabling this item to give you opportunity to come back. However, I do want to call out that there is risk in that if the funds are then expended on bringing forward these applications, and we still have just as much discomfort because it is a high visibility corner, which isn't changing. It is, currently proposed to be that untested material that is a primary use. There's risk. And so those are the only ones that I will call out. Again, I think we all have talked about in the past how beautiful the concept is. This building looks fantastic on paper. But our concern is, what will it look like in 20 years? And even with the 10-year warranty, what will it look like in 11 years? Because 11 years is probably still a long way from a full secondary renovation. So with that, is there any other discussion before I entertain a motion for a reconsideration? Ms. Fox?
Right. I just wonder if we should not, or Ms. Trout, I'd like to ask you, TRESPA is obviously something that we're given some consideration to, and we certainly would be wonderful if the product turned out to do everything that you proposed that it would do. But if it doesn't, can you provide, or would the architect help provide something, as Ms. Call said, another secondary material like a hardy plank, or the ceramic material, or even a rain screen, which is a different kind of a wood, although I know you don't want to use wood. I guess what I'm saying is that, are there any other options outside of this synthetic laminate that were even considered, or you would even use as a fallback if the TRESPA, to give you more than one option when you return for the final development plan?
And I would challenge that even a little bit further and ask for a primary permitted material to be used as the primary use.
So I guess to respond, yes, we have looked at several materials. I think our goal was going after this wood look, so we were somewhat limited when we tried on a few of the other materials. We didn't get that natural look. It looked very fabricated, fake, very cold and steely. So, our hope is to keep that look and find a product that works really well. We understand that we're taking a risk, and, I think if we can't prove this out with a material that we're comfortable with, that's going to last for a long time, then we're probably back at the design drawing board, because we're going to have to just study it and figure out what that's going to look like. I don't like the design of the building with something that is really monotone and stone-like. So I'm taking all these comments back, and we're definitely going to discuss that. Obviously, we're going to want to have our ducks in the row with the best shot before we come back to this commission. So taking all the notes I can. I know we had discussed hardy plank, and I don't think that in this application it was going to work, but I can take that back to Rex as well. This is kind of our opportunity to see if any of these are going to work, and I will definitely put all the warranty information and stack that up against all of the primary and secondary materials to share back with the commission.
Thank you for that, Ms. Trout. Staff, in the interim, has any public comment been received on this item?
We have no public comment on this application.
Thank you. With that, I will entertain a motion, if one is to be made, for reconsideration of the earlier determination by the Planning and Zoning Commission for the final development plan.
So moved.
I have a first. Do I have a second? Ms. Fox?
Second.
Ms. Beal?
Miss Kennedy,
Yes.
Mr. Schneier,
Yes.
Mr. Fishman,
Yes.
Mr. Supalack,
Yes.
Ms. Fox, Ms. Call,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now I'm looking for a separate motion that the development plan for this application be tabled. Applicant, just ensuring that is your desire this evening.
So,
Yes, we'd like to table it.
Thank you, Ms. Trout.
second.
Mr. Grimes,
Yes.
Mr. Supalack,
Yes.
Ms. Call,
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mr. Schneier,
Yes.
Mr. Fishman,
Yes.
Ms. Fox.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Beal, and thank you, Ms. Trout. Thank you for coming back and spending your evening with us, and we wish you luck in the next phases of the project and look forward to seeing you soon. All right, our next case this evening is informal case for Toller Road Townhomes located at 6851 Village Parkway, case 21-004 INF. This is for an informal review and feedback on architectural for an attached single-family residential neighborhood on an 11.61 acre site, Zone Bridge Street District, Sawmill Center neighborhood. The site is northwest of the intersection of Village Parkway and John Shields Parkway. And Nikki, it looks like you have our presentation, so I will turn the time over to you.
Great. Good evening. As mentioned, this is a request for informal review and non-binding feedback for architectural character for Toller Road Townhomes. The site is approximately 11 acres in size and is northwest of the intersection of John Shields Parkway and Village Parkway, with Teller Road bounding the site to the north and Teller Flats located immediately to the west. This is the preliminary site layout, which was reviewed previously by the Planning and Zoning Commission. You'll recall a total of 155 units are proposed. With 0.7 acres of open space, also to establish 3 new public rights-of-way, and a total of 4 blocks of development. Staff has provided surrounding development character for the Commission's consideration tonight. Staff is recommending that the Commission provide feedback on the integration of the proposed architecture with the surrounding context. Shown on the screen are architectural characters of Teller Flats, Bridge Park, Block H, as well as Greystone Mews. To provide a bit of background, this was reviewed as a concept plan in March of 2020. At that time, 2 architectural options were shown as provided on the screen. The commission was generally supportive, although did prefer pitched roofs to flat roofs and encouraged a variable building form. And particular attention should be paid to the side elevations adjacent to major intersections. In December of 2020, the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed the architectural concept on the screen. This was a defined architectural elevation based on the concept plan. You'll notice here the addition of a greater number of primary materials, specifically brick, as well as a warmer color palette. At the time, the commission encouraged the applicant to provide usable front stoops, emphasized a desire to engage the street, and requested the application of more primary materials as well as a variable roof plane. This evening, the applicant is requesting feedback prior to the final development plan submittal. Within the Bridge Street District, the numeric requirements associated with each building type require a significant level of detail, both on the applicant's part as well as in staff's review. Therefore, the applicant is seeking that feedback tonight prior to finalizing these designs. So with this, the applicant is sharing a 7-unit elevation. This elevation includes a variable roof height, as well as opportunities for dormers and front gables. You'll see here there are a variety of different window designs, as well as box bay windows and Juliet balconies. The design is further differentiated by the additional application of primary brick material, as well as a diverse color palette and a variety in the front door and front stoop treatments. Staff is recommending the following discussion questions tonight. Does the commission support the proposed traditional architectural character? Is the architectural character compatible with the surrounding development? And are the proposed design details harmonious across the various unit types? And then, of course, any other considerations by the commission this evening. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, the applicant and the applicant's architectural representative is here as well tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Before we go forward, could I have you touch just a little bit, as it came up in previous discussions, difference in this particular area between the public and private realm?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Planning and Zoning Commission had provided some feedback that the importance of the public and private spaces within the Bridge Street District, and specifically providing a greater separation between the public and private realm to allow for a transition and to really provide that amenity space that will activate the public street. That does align with the area plan principles within the Bridge Street District in terms of development character and building form.
Thank you, Nikki. Welcome, Mr. Underhill. It's nice to see you again.
Thank you, you as well, and we appreciate the opportunity this evening. We're going to keep our comments brief because we really want to hear from you. I used my football game analogy the last time, and I think we all kind of got where we were in the process. So I would consider this a brief timeout, maybe a 30-second timeout as we move through the fourth quarter. And we felt it would be appropriate, rather than spending a lot of time and energy and frankly monetary resources, to see if we're going down the right path here with one of the buildings, and see if it was then if we get some final guidance to move ahead to bring you forth a final and more comprehensive architectural plan. So the intent tonight, I'm going to let Keith Filipkowski speak here momentarily. Keith is the architect for Pulte, and of course you know him from the last time. But we have him in particular, but we have all tried to really go through your previous comments in great detail, and we hope we've done a good job of addressing them. But we look forward to your feedback. And with that, I'll turn it over to Keith.
Yep. Hey guys, first of all, can you hear me? I'm doing voice over phone and using my PC.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So first, thanks for hearing us out tonight, and thank you, Nicole, for the introduction. Eloquently put as usual, and Aaron, same. Out of the last meeting, we heard, I heard the idea of converting to a traditional design, expressions of individuality, focusing on unique entryways, and of course the uninterrupted roof lines. So I feel strongly that we've accomplished or made a lot of positive progress towards all of those things from top to bottom. I hope the board will agree. I want to just point out a few things. As Aaron said, I don't want to talk a whole lot tonight, but I'm certainly available to answer any questions because we're most interested in your feedback. But for starters, I just want to let the group know that the elevation we're showing today, we are still offering the front-loaded roof terrace option. The idea here tonight was to show in the roof line, in the absence of that articulation, what the roof plane may look like. And so trying to make sure you guys understand that we are using things such as dormers and gables to fill that space out in the absence of those options. Also, obviously, we are now undulating the roof lines vertically. As a reminder, that's in combination with the units being offset front to back. The variation you're seeing tonight on this demonstration is a 1 foot difference from unit to unit. We feel like that accomplishes the task at hand. But as you travel down the line of the building from the top to the bottom, as Nicole said, there's various features that we've tried to take careful attention to in a traditional way, that may be in the spirit and keeping of just that traditional architecture or historic architecture. So I suppose the idea of traditional, in a sense, timing couldn't be any better, right, after the first presentation tonight, in the idea that we want to make sure we're drawing out all of those traditional characteristics that do make the streetscape pleasant. So that's articulated in the different kinds of brick coursings over the windows, symmetry of window alignment and placement. We are articulating unique entryways in the sense that every combination of unit here is trying to demonstrate its own unique feel, be it widow walks, the pediments shown at the entries, the door style, virtually anything we could to express the individuality while staying in keeping with historical architecture and the traditional look. With that, I'll take any questions. If there's anything you feel like I've left out, I'm certainly willing to add more. I just don't want to continue to talk if you guys are anxious to give feedback.
Thank you both. So looking to the commission, questions and comments for the applicant or for staff at this point? Ms. Fox?
I have a couple comments. You're making reference to some rooftop terraces. How exactly and where exactly, how do you intend to incorporate that? And then second question is, I thought I read in the statement that this is a representation of 7 different styles, but only maybe 2 styles would appear in any building, in any building. Is that correct? It's like a building would not have all 7 styles, I guess is what I'm asking, or even 4 for that matter. Am I correct in that?
Well, there may have been a couple questions in that, but first let me just start to distinguish that what we're really trying to represent in alignment with, again, the individuality is that, our maximum building spread of units within the development is going to be a unit building. And so it was appropriate for me to show you a 7-unit building with 7 different articulations of the unit so that you know that they're all different. We are not necessarily stating that each individual unit is reminiscent of a specific and different architectural style. So I want to be clear to say that that's not what we're representing. We're just showing you that there's individuality, and now we have a broader availability to use those 7 different combinations across the site as we see fit collectively. So while and again, this is a portion. This is a part that I'm really interested in the feedback from the board. When we talked about the great need of individuality last time, it's in my humble opinion, I would like to see across the site that we not necessarily have any one of the same unit elevation type replicated in a given building. However, if the board feels that that is appropriate and that we're too individualized, as was maybe alluded to in the staff comments, we're open to those suggestions. That is, if we had a 3-unit building, for example, what's not to say that we could use even all the same unit elevation for all 3 on the building, or 2 of the 3. So that's the idea. With respect to the rooftop terraces, the application of the void that it would fill in the roof itself is no different than it previously was. It would still be a private scenario from the next, separated by the roof line. Although we, in this case, with the removal of the parapet, we would use a railing system for the fall protection. And so I think it may have been commented in the staff report too, as to whether that would be appropriate or not. I would argue that it absolutely is. I mean, you can look back to historical architecture and see examples of federal style that, they have cornice line balustrades. I think it would look very elegant in this case. And I think it would also draw on some of the widow walk railing that we're incorporating into the entryway designs, as well as at the Juliet balconies.
Okay. I'll let others ask questions. Those were my questions. I'll have comments and some thoughts as we go forward, but thank you for answering that.
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Looking to the rest of the commission, Mr. Schneier.
I guess I'm still not clear, even though Jane asked the same questions that I wanted to ask. Typical units or a typical building would have 7 units, and you show 7 different elevations. Is your proposal that you would mix and match so that every 7-unit building would have these 7 elevations, but in a different order? Or would some 7-unit buildings only be represented by 2 or 3 of these? And if so, how would that work? Would there be 2 that, would you just spread them across, or 2 would look exactly the same, or would you sprinkle them in? I think you get sort of the gist of that. And then a second question, we did talk about stoops, and I see sort of a step in some of the elevations. Just point of clarification, is there, I don't see that there are, and the question is there, or have you contemplated that suggestion of sort of a 2-step stoop porch sort of thing, unless I'm missing that? Those are my 2 questions.
Mr. We can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Now?
Yes.
Okay. So to the first comment, with respect to the building variety, first and foremost, I would make sure the group knows that the building variety strategy that we laid out in the previous presentation is still intact. That's still the game plan. But then more specifically, how we're going to articulate those differences. First and foremost, we'll be in alignment with the code requirements for any objective criteria that needs to be met, of course. But then beyond that, it does start to get into the ambiguity of preference. And if it was a preference, if we're really to go full force individuality, I would argue that it's probably a best case scenario to ensure that every one building does not have the same unit elevation within the building. However, we are open to the opposite of that. Again, meaning that if we had, again, a four unit building, for example, it could be the case that we have 2 of those 4 units be the same unit elevation, or 3 or 4. I think that's some of the collective work that I'm anxious to get started on with Nicole and staff, so that we can create a comprehensive plan for final development that makes sense and is to the liking of all. With respect to the we absolutely did consider, and I don't know, Nicole, if it was certainly in the presentation that I provided. I don't know if this made your presentation. It may have gotten snipped out, but I showed a vignette directly below the elevation to express how the building is continuing to offset itself, horizontally front to back. But also demonstrated on that was the stoop, or the pad associated with the front entry. So on these 7 unit examples, going from left to right, I would tell you the first one on the left would be a stoop at the appropriate dimension, either the minimum size or just above. I believe that was a 5 by 5. Don't quote me on that. In the second unit over, we would still have a stoop, but it's not a covered stoop in that case. We were using the detailing and trim surround of the door to articulate that unit. Going to the third unit, it would be just like the first. However, then going to the fourth, you can see now where we're expanding the porch area so that you can have more use of it with respect to placing seats and that sort of thing. And we're not opposed to being more or less of one of those 3 combinations, but the example you're seeing today is trying to be a balance of all of the 3 across the 7 different unit types. Again, in the spirit of variety and individuality.
Thank you, Mr. Burkowski. Mr. Schneier, did you have any other questions? Looking to the rest of the commission. Fishman, you're muted.
I can't hear.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I think they've come a long way, and I really appreciate that in going from what they had to more traditional look. I have to say that I think it's still a long way from what Mrs. Fox showed in comparison to what we were really looking for, the pictures. If you put those side by side to the pictures that Mrs. Fox showed, we're still a long way from the quality look and so on. I think the deviation from building to building on the ones Ms. Fox showed was more than a foot. And I think that made a big difference. And I think the use of the primary materials was a lot more. And I think that what I'm looking for there is something that's different, traditional. I like that, but I think we're really looking for something that is really going to age well. And we talked about that in the previous case, but age well and look good 10, 20 years from now. I think the ones that Ms. Fox showed look good now, but there's buildings that were built like that 30, 40 years ago that still look fabulous. So I think that's kind of what we're looking for. I think also when they talk about 7 units, 7 different units, or 2 the same or whatever, I think that's kind of, for me, that's up to them. The ones that Ms. Fox showed, many of the buildings, the whole building was the same and the next building was different. And so I think that's just, I guess the trained eye would tell you if that looks better that way or the other way. I think the ones Ms. Fox showed were all one architecture in each building, but the buildings were different, and I think it looked great. So I think there we go. And also, I didn't, the stoops, certainly don't look like those tubes. And I assume you're going to have brick walks and some of the features that these have. So I'm still looking for that. The other concern is we didn't see, there's no way to see pictures of the backs of these buildings. And actually the ones Ms. Fox showed, some of those, I know the buildings, and they're just as pretty in the back as they are in the front. And so I kind of like to know what we're going to have in the backs of those buildings. And we know what that you had mentioned the sides are going to be finished, but in the backs. So yeah, there we go. So can you help me with those questions?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, with respect to it, a long way to go. We acknowledge that we're not in the end zone yet, as Aaron might use the analogy. As we start working towards the details required to get an acceptance to final development plan, we dive into some of the details. As you've referenced, Mrs. Fox's picture, the pictures that were presented from the board the last. And so perhaps it is the idea that columns are beefier, or we change from rectangular to cylindrical, or any number of marbling or embellishments may be added as we look into that a little bit more closely. I think, for us at this juncture, we want to make sure we're on track with the form, the mass, the style, so that we're not heading down this road of investigating to the nth degree all of these details, all for naught. So I recognize we have a long way to go there. I do, however, feel like we have come a long way since the previous submittals. All you have to do is just look at the examples Nicole put up in a flash and know that you can see the articulation throughout the elevation, whether it's soldier coursing or additional elements that we've added on to the building. So we recognize there's work there, but we do feel like we have come a long way thus far. The roof height, I mentioned before at the last meeting, and I think Mark maybe spoke on my behalf the most last time, with the understanding that it does get complex when you think in terms of compounded angles, horizontal and vertical offsets, and then from a structural standpoint, how we grow and shrink any given unit from one to the next. There are implications with regard to that. In this instance, we're showing an example where we've increased a top plate of our top floor to accomplish the task of varying the roof heights at a certain point in time. With wood frame members, there are different considerations that go on constructability wise to make some of those things happen. So we felt like this was a good balance with that effort. I'd be curious to know the rest of the board's opinion on that specific matter, because it was something that at the end of the last meeting when we were going through the waivers, it was a hot topic of discussion. So I am very curious about that here from everybody. Materials you mentioned, I would just point out that as the primary materials are listed in the code book, this example actually has a significant more amount of primary material of masonry, whereas some of the previous presentations were reliant upon some accent areas that we were hopeful to request and get approval as a supplemental, as a secondary material that may be considered as a primary. So we've overcome that with this. We are certainly past the 80% mark. So from a measure of code, we should be in the clear there. And I realize this discussion is not about code, so don't misinterpret my comments, but that is a reference at some point. The back to front, we've concentrated a lot of effort on the front here, obviously, just to make sure we're on the same page with directionally where we're going. But in terms of at least the size, back to the idea that the previous middles were reliant upon accent materials, whereas this is not. You'll see that the brick courses are running from top to bottom in all but two of the scenarios. And so inherently, with the code requirement of masonry to return at inside corners, in this example here, you would have a full brick facade on both sides of the building. So dramatically different from the last submittals, whereby we were showing somewhere in the neighborhood of even 15% on a elevation that wasn't considered high impact. That same masonry material that's left itself on the side of the building would continue to wrap around the back of the building. In the example, you see the two outermost units projected forward. So that brick would return around to the rear of the building full height until it met the second and sixth unit, terminating in an inside corner. Otherwise, I didn't hear an abundance of feedback related to the rear elevations. I know there was some commentary, but I didn't hear anything earth-shattering last time that I felt it warranted an overhaul to the construct of those, and that it would be of the magnitude that I would need to present it today. We otherwise felt like we were fairly confident about what the board would have expected from both a side elevation and a rear elevation standpoint, knowing all the while that we needed a little bit more consideration for some of the high impact areas. And then last, to your comments with respect to the brick sidewalks, I'll defer to maybe Matt or Aaron on that, but I would just say that in the context of elements that are not on the building, we also discussed last time, and this parlays into the unique entry characteristics, the idea of incorporating landscaping in as a buffer or an additional attribute to the uniqueness and character and all in thought process to what the streetscape's going to look like. And clearly my rendering here doesn't afford the opportunity to look at landscaping because we haven't introduced that quite yet. Again, reverting back to the idea that we're trying to accomplish the form, the mass, the style of architecture in general terms so that we know in the right direction. So Matt and Aaron, I don't know if you wanted to comment any more on anything I said, but more specifically the brick sidewalk that they've shown.
Obviously, we've just got a snapshot on the vertical, sort of the more vertical elements here, and we have every intention that we're going to have a lot more detail, obviously, when we come back with a full plan. So that wasn't, we weren't trying to avoid the issue. It's just we're not there yet.
Thank you, Mr. Underhill. Thank you, Mr. Philip Kowski. Warren, you're muted.
I can't hear you.
I agree with you that you've come a long way, and I really appreciate that. I mean, this is a long way from where we were. I mentioned the backs because so often we see a lovely looking project from the front, and the back is a flat vinyl siding or something. And I remember 40 years ago, I saw John Reiner turn down a project where he said it looked like a movie set. That when they do movie sets, they do the front and there's nothing in the back. And I just wanted to make sure that, again, quality surrounds the entire building. So if it looks great in the front and you walk around the back and it isn't quality, you get that feeling. So. But I appreciate what you've done, but I think we're partly there, but I think that it still doesn't look close to the pictures that Ms. Fox showed, and I think that this project deserves that kind of quality because it's a lot of units. It's a big part of the Bridge Street corridor, and I think that I'm really anxious to see your next rendering, and hopefully it's going to be something I can really proudly vote for. So that and reflects that quality. Thank you.
One quick piece of commentary on that. The images that were shown, obviously those are beautiful homes, and a lot of that has to do with location. I think Mr. Schneer last time mentioned our location near the rear of it could be an empty theater here pretty soon. So, you know, there are differences between where those images were, those buildings were located and what we have here. That's not to say this won't be to a very high level of quality. And those other projects, I know for certain, have the benefit of a tax abatement, which obviously helps you to reinvest into materials to put into the building. But we understand where you're coming from, Mr. Fishman, but you know, we'll have to continue to work to get it as close as we can to that level based on our location and, you know, economics.
I think if the theater abandons that, something else great will go in there where the theater was. I think that we fully intend to make the Bridge Street, the entire corridor, something of quality, and something 50 years from now, people can walk down the street and say, this is really great. So I think no matter what happens at the theater, I think I personally, I can't speak for the rest of the board, but I think expect to see really something that we can be proud of there.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman.
Just a last note on that. You know, Aaron commented on the economic value of the consideration, but from an architect's perspective, you know, again, we're still looking more closely at some of these finer details as we move through the product or project, and we want everything to be of high quality. We also need to take special care and attention to, you know, not mass and scale only from a comprehensive building standpoint, but each element of the architecture within a unit, right? We want to make sure the proportions are appropriate. There is a point where you can embellish too much and an entryway can be overwhelming and out of proportion with the rest. So that's a careful consideration as we go through it as well. And hopefully the board can be open-minded to that aspect of things as we move along.
Thank you, Mr. Polkowski. Looking to the rest of the commission, comments? Ms. Kennedy?
Hi, thank you, Ms. Call. You know, you're asking for our informal feedback, so I'll give my opinions and informal feedback as well. You asked us to comment on the traditional feel of the buildings, and you know, in my opinion, this hits the mark on traditional, which is a favorable style for me. I appreciate that Ms. Martin gave us the reference images of kind of the surrounding neighborhoods, if you will, surrounding complexes, because I think it really does range from very traditional to very modern. And I think this rendering that you brought before us today, you know, does lean traditional, but it also has some modern touches as well. So it feels like it is appropriate given the surrounding, you know, contextual properties. Honestly, it's reminiscent to me of the West Bridge Street streetscape, and so it feels quaint and cozy and yet individual in its look and feel. I'm in favor of this approach generally, and I think those were the majority of my comments. So I'll stop with that for now. Thank you, Ms. Call.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Mr. Grimes?
I agree with those comments. I like the variation, the traditional feel, the breaking up of the roof line. I think that's great. I'd like to see them sprinkled throughout. I wouldn't want to see two in one building close together. But there's a lot you can do with the variations on the front door entryways. I mean, you show 7 here. You could probably have 14 different front entrances of similar feel, but to make it distinctive with different combinations of buildings and based on the location around the project. So I think it's great. I like the tone, the colors. I was holding the rendering up at the site, thinking about its reflection in those glass windows across the street there on the north, where you're going to see those fully reflected in the bright sunlight. And I think it would look pretty good at that location. So I like where you're heading. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Mr. Supelak, do you want to go next?
Keith, I'm gonna get into some specifics with you here and just pose some questions. You articulated the push and the the meandering of the units forward and back is right now, I mean, it looks on your plan a little more robust, but I heard you say like 12 inches?
2 feet, 2 feet.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you. I was worried, you know how these things go. I was worried that, you know, a push and pull of 12 inches was not going to, it was just going to end up feeling flat. So I like to hear 2 feet. I think I agree in large part with my fellow commissioners, right? Like there's something here. The nature of these complexes, there are a lot of units here, and the nature of them is that they do potentially become a large. I think somebody actually described it like a Soviet bloc, right? Like just these repeated units. So I applaud you for, despite having the task of developing a number of different buildings, I applaud you for helping us make it feel like cityscape, you know, fabric, right? Via the variation. Kudos, thank you. Applaud it across the board. The small touches of adjusting the roof line, that will help. The variation in the language down these buildings will help. I don't have any qualms about leaving that in your good hands to potentially discern which buildings, which types of units are used on which buildings. The fact that there's going to be some 3-unit buildings and some 7-unit buildings and some 4-unit buildings throughout this complex actually makes that nice, right? And I will say a few things here. I mean, I think we're touching on it. There's sensitivity still to the front door and the stoop. You and I, we all know there's an effort here. I worry that I don't know. I'm a little underwhelmed myself in general, and I think there's just because there's not really a porch here. There's stoops here. There's not really a porch here. And so I go someplace different, whereas, and forgive me for a separate question. Are these all sort of covered? Are these all canopies that are with columns coming out? Or do I see in unit 2 and like unit 7 that those are just basically pilasters against the building with a little bit of a canopy that's really tucked against the building?
Mark, you cut out for a portion of that question. I think you're. Can you repeat that for me, just so I'm clear? I'm sorry.
So I'm trying to discern where there are legitimate roofs, or I'm sorry, legitimate porch roofs. It looks like Unit 1 has a porch roof. The columns come away.
Yep.
Okay. It looks like Unit 2 could just be pilasters against the building.
That's correct.
Unit 3 is porch with columns.
Covered.
Okay.
Columns,
Yep.
yes.
Unit 4 is a covered porch. Unit 5 is flat. Unit 6 is a porch. Unit 7 is flat.
Correct.
Okay. So I actually, again, we're just going to talk. You know, this gets a little subjective. I actually like that they're not all covered. I actually would be inclined to say, why don't we take Unit 4 and Unit 6 and take that porch all the way across the front? Give two of these 7 units a legit front porch. All of a sudden, the language back and forth of some do, some don't, some have a real porch, not just, you know, a small stoop, a 5x5 stoop that's covered, but like a real porch. All of a sudden, it just gives you another tool in your arsenal to help break up these masses and the cityscape. And there's even like on Unit 1, the nature of your language there. I feel like that could, we've seen it in, I'm going to say like German Village, where that door is actually inset a couple feet, right? And the stoop is sort of covered by the mass of the inset type of thing. So food for thought. I think that's where all of a sudden you will win on stoops and porches, that aspect, and then clearly the approach and the landscaping and all the stuff that is still, I think, absent from this level of design. I'm also going to continue, and you've heard it from me a couple different times, regardless of the design. Obviously, this is a very row house oriented thing. From this view, it looks great. Row houses, you and I both know, are to the left and the right. There's usually this really narrow alleyway when they are the historic sort of row houses. And of course, so the side elevation isn't that significant, and you don't have to worry about it a whole lot. You actually don't even experience it in any way, shape, or form that robustly. But this complex has a lot of those, just the nature of the shape of it. It has a lot of those sides that are really exposed. It has the two in the I'm going to say the southeast corner in particular, facing a green space. The end cap of some of these is going to become really critical. I'm going to continue to advocate and look for, that's great opportunity to make some special units on your ends, and maybe the massing comes off of that, and not just 2 feet, but you know what I mean, like your 2 stories instead of the 3 stories, and your massing bumps out there in a really meaningful way. The other, obviously, you have the boxed windows on your fronts. That becomes language you can use on the side and sort of achieve something really nice in that regard where it's appropriate. I'm not advocating for this on all of the side elevations, because clearly you do have some row, like the south side of McCune Avenue is kind of really row housey. But that's one thing I'll articulate there. And then I had one more sort of detail suggestion, and it might be on the dormers. I don't see why one of these units couldn't have a little bit of a different rhythm. All the dormers, when you do them, they're all the same, right? So I don't know that there's one of these units couldn't have 3 dormers instead of 2 dormers, right? Just to give you another tool in your belt to change along these masses, and or I guess I don't even know. I would want to study it, so take this with a grain of salt. Is one of them shed dormers instead of the gables? Not advocating. You know, I mean, you as the owner of the traditional here, there's merit to looking into that and seeing if that's a thing or not. One of Jane's examples, the second one had lots of shed dormers. Again, it was a little bit different in its style than the first example, but food for thought. Again, I think all those touches will add up. I think your front rails on the porches will sort of break this up more. I think you're asking for, is this the right language? And I think we're getting to a point where we're saying yes, plus or minus, with some refinement on the language, if you will. So thank you. I applaud it.
Thank you. Terrific feedback. Thank you. I'll take all of that into consideration. It's all manageable and they're great ideas. I've got some ideas that piggyback off of that as well, already spinning around in my head. So I appreciate your comments, Mark. Thank you.
Rebecca, you're muted.
Yeah, I realize that. A couple of comments from me, and then we'll go back to the commission for other comments. I know that there are specific items that we're trying to get to, and I'll go back to Mr. Underhill's, what yard line we're on. And I think we're approaching the end zone, but I don't think we're quite there, to echo Ms. Fox and Mr. Fishman. I see the articulation in the roof lines, but I see the exact letter of the law and not really taking advantage of that opening that Mr. Supalak gave you in the, hey, we're not going to hold you exactly to the 3 feet, but we don't want it to look like one big building there. But I don't think that there's any creative powers that went into breaking that up. It was just, up and down and up and down. I feel like a kid who's taking every other step up onto the curb. Additionally, I do like the inspirational images that the commission brings, because I think that depicts kind of what we're seeing in our heads. We don't expect, Pulte to go and grab that and pay for that architecture and then build exactly the same thing. But we're looking for a standard. And I think that, Mr. Fishman touched on we're looking for something, even if the theater goes dark, we're in Dublin. We hold everyone to a high standard, and anything that went in there would other developments around your property elevate your property. And we expect kind of that symbiotic relationship between different properties in Dublin, always looking for this upward trajectory. And you heard the level of detail that goes into the very adjacent historic district. And then the up and down, one call out there is the inspirational image. You'll notice they had no difference in articulation, but they had chimneys to break them up. And so it's that type of thing where we're not saying you have to meet the 3 feet and it has to be, squared and 3 feet exactly between units. It's just something else. So looking at are there photos, or can the center unit, yes, we realize we don't want every single unit copied, but there is some pleasantness to symmetry. So if the 2 center units on an odd unit count building could be mirror images of one another, kind of making it look like one unit in the center and then each other unit looking like its own design. I think we're getting close to the end zone. I don't think we're quite there. And then just one call out, I know Mark mentioned the 3 dormers. I've seen some other images that look like the same product that Pulte has in different areas. And those 3 dormers, at least with the sizing on the other units that look remarkably similar to this building, they do look a little congested to me just because of the sizing. So just be sensitive to that. When I looked at one of the images, I think it was in Virginia that this particular property was built in, there was very little roof visible on either side of those dormers and almost none between the 3 dormers. So just a call out for sensitivity there. Do we have other questions, comments from the commission? Ms. Fox.
I really appreciate everybody's comments, because I think that we're trying to describe an abstract quality that's very difficult, I know, to put into a framework that an architect can come home and draw on a piece of paper. So I hope that we're giving you some constructive thoughts. I really have struggled all along with trying to convey what it is when we say quality in a building design. And it is more than simply, to me, it is more than simply the materials that you use and in the design. So, I think there are like parts of what I'm looking for in quality is how these buildings will aesthetically and practically perform in the Bridge Street area. And in the Sawmill Center District, the primary intention of any buildings going in there, whether they're mixed use, whether they're a single family, whether they're attached, is that the neighborhood will have a strong pedestrian-friendly streetscape. First and foremost, that's like that's like prime one. So we can talk about architecture all day, but if these street level fronts don't interact and create a socially connected, interesting pedestrian streetscape, then we can design from top to bottom, and it's still not going to meet the intent of the central Sawmill Center neighborhood. Part of that, and why I think we keep coming back to it, is at that first floor level where people are going to come out their door and interact with their neighbor, or take the dog for a walk, or stay and stop and talk for a bit, or maybe sit out front, read the paper, have a cup of coffee. That front level, that first floor, has to have a significant integration to the public realm. And so, Nicole, if you'll go back to a couple of those images, and even Greystone Muse, I just want to point out what quality elements I think that we're trying to help you understand we want so badly. So Nikki, if you can do that. Okay, Greystone Muse has significantly couple steps up to a really nice little porch. And there's a variety in that entranceway, and a variety in the massing in the dormer. And there's quite a bit of movement back and forth on the front, and it's close to the street. That's one of them. If you could go to those others that we showed the last time.
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Nikki. I expect you to be a superwoman.
Sorry.
Well, she's looking for that. And I think Rebecca made some really good points, is that, it reads very busy to me. The entire building across, if you were to use every one of those elements, it reads very busy to me. And I think there is some benefit to having a little bit more continuity in, okay, this one, even though it doesn't have the stoop and is not one of my favorites when it comes to sitting and having a cup of coffee. It is one of my favorites, though, when it comes to the vertical break, the way the facade breaks and it pulls back, and it doesn't create a one-dimensional face on the street. And it has horizontal elements like the heavy lintels underneath the windows that break up the front as well, with some variation in materials in between the stone. But the one that was more of a brick that had maybe the next one, Nikki, that one. There's steps that you can sit on. There's iron little surrounds around the front porch. And I noticed this downtown in many of the new units that they're building down there. There's at least an area that's functional that you can sit, that's integrated with the landscape, which then creates this nice transition to the sidewalk. I think it's more than just having a stoop. It has to be functional enough that you'll want to be there. Secondly, thanks, Nikki. Secondly, as I look across the building front, I read on the third level, 28 windows going straight across, all the same shape. And then on the second level, I still see 28 windows going straight across, varying in shape. And then on the first level, it's still 28 openings. They're just designed differently with some front doors. It reads too predictable, I guess. I don't know, Mr. Trout, if I'm very good at describing this, but I feel like what's really important here is that this building has a legacy quality about it, and that's what I feel is missing. It doesn't meet the timelessness of one, integrating the street and a place where people will want to come for the next 50 years. It's just not there yet. I think that it's so important how the front, how all the street level areas, and also the back too, because you're going to be opening to open spaces, how all of this functions. And I feel as if, I like the fact that you've moved to a traditional architecture, but I think that that it's a little bit too predictable in its traditional architecture. I'd like to see maybe more variation in one building from the other in its shape and form. And I know I'm not an architect, and I'm having trouble exactly explaining to you. That's why I utilize visual images. But most importantly, the functionality of the front porches and the stoops need to be larger, more inviting, more usable, more interactive with the public realm. So I hope that helps. I don't mind the fact that you're thinking about rooftop terraces. I just can't see it in these images, how it would be harmonious. But those are my thoughts, and I hope that helps.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Mr. Schneer.
Well, I'd echo some of Jane's comments, but a couple things struck me. keep looking at this, and these are very personal opinions, because I will say that traditional architecture is not my favorite style, but that's neither here nor there. But this, in my mind's eye, I sort of see Main Street of Disney World, and that's not like the right image. And I think it almost appears that you took previous comments and say they want detail, we'll give them detail, and there is a lot going on here. And I defer to people with far more experience than I have with respect to how these really come off, including the applicant and other and my fellow commissioners. The other concern I have about the level of detail and the pictures that some of the pictures that Jane showed and that we may all be familiar with in this city and other cities is your price point, which we don't know. A rendering is a rendering. This could look very good from 100 yards out, but when you get close and you have all that detail and the quality of the materials, I won't say, I'm not even suggesting or alluding that it will be compromised, but these are apartment townhomes, not custom single family homes. So I worry that you add all this to these buildings, and in order to keep it at the right price point, it doesn't look as real and substantial and to everyone's mind's eye that withstands the test of time. So how you walk that balance, I think we're saying, if I listen to my fellow commissioners, we may be saying contradictory things, which is of no help to you whatsoever. But leave it at that and see if you tell us if you're getting any sort of sense of the commission or whether we're just floundering and not helping you.
Thank you, Mr. Schneer. Mr. Fishman. Warren, you're muted.
I agree with all my fellow commissioners, and I think that one of the problems we're having is how do you describe quality, and I think that's very difficult. I think that's what we're looking for, and when Lance was talking, it reminded me of I was at Easton a while back, and I was walking through the Pete Edwards townhouses. And there was this couple standing in front of the townhouses. And as I walked past her, she turned around and pointed and she said, "I want our new house to look like the front of this townhouse." Okay. And so she felt that quality. And I think that's what we're looking for. And so I think we're going to have to leave it up to them to come up with that look, that quality. And I can't, some of my commissioners have a lot more knowledge of architecture than I do, and I can't say put a dormer here or put a dormer that, but I know quality when I see it, and just like that young couple did. And so I think that's what I'd like to leave up to them. So when it comes back, it's something that, as I said earlier, we can be proud of. It looks closer to the pictures that Ms. Fox showed us, and something that we can be proud of amongst all those other high density buildings and contemporary buildings and so on. That's something that people say, boy, that's traditional, that's cool here, and boy, it looks great. And I want my house to look like the front of that house. And she's pointing to a townhouse, and she said, I want it to look like my house looked like the front of that. So I think that's my only comment. And I think all my commissioners, in my opinion, gave great feedback, and I can't disagree with anybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman. I know that you were looking for direction. I'm going to go through a few items and looking to the commissioners to help me if you feel that I forgot something. So as far as the traditional look, we are in favor of the direction, generally favorable of the direction in the traditional type theme. We're looking forward to details with more, landscaping and that sort of vertical non-structural content. Generally supportive of the articulation front to back, and would challenge a little bit more there on the entries, the porches, I think it was Ms. Fox who said, we're looking for the pedestrian-friendly streetscape and that engaging component that especially is on that floor level. Looking for a little bit more in the front door, the stoops, those entries, the porches, something there to dress it up, while not looking to be prescriptive on exactly what it's looking for, but that general direction of engagement on the front floor and less of a homogeneous look, more variety in establishing that quality of, that character of quality. So Commission, did I miss anything? I would like to hit, I know last time we were kind of sticky on the roof line, so I know I brought it up. I didn't hear it much from anyone else. Looking to see if anyone has any feedback on roof line. Ms. Fox?
I think it's important, and I think what Lance had to say is right on. It's very difficult. I know we're talking about roof line. I think it's very difficult if we don't call out the fact that he made a point. It reads across a little bit as if we tried to take as many traditional styles of windows and doors as we could on this, and it gives the Disney World look. I think that's what you really have to be thinking about, is if you can take some of our visual representations and see that there is a quality style about it, and Bridge Street allows you the variance or the flexibility to be creative. So don't worry that you're checking every one of the boxes when it comes to size and form and window shape. If the design of the building gives you an aha moment while you're drawing it, come back with that, because sometimes I think the form-based code locks you in so badly to checking off the boxes that you're afraid you won't meet code, but that's not the intent here. The intent is to design great architecture and be the best at it that you can be, so that it has a legacy quality. And I think that's so important that you hear, because I can imagine how frustrating it could be to try to meet the form-based code and creativity at the same time. So I really needed to add that little comment, and thanks, Rebecca.
Certainly. And then Nikki, could I have you present just those 3 questions to make sure that we're not missing anything? And then applicant, I'm going to turn some time back over to you to kind of go through and ask any questions or ask for clarifications based on our comments this evening.
One moment.
Thank you. I do want to highlight, there was one other thing that Mark mentioned that slipped my mind until now, and that is on the end cap units. I know that the Crawwell community has been plagued with some other issues, but one thing that they did really well is the differences in the individual units and the wrapping of the building around the sides. Not so much on the back, although those catwalks on the 3rd level do help, but on the sides where the units on the side, they engage with more. Obviously, in a townhome type product, you have more light possibilities in an end unit because you can put windows on 2 elevations of the 3 front. But consideration of that in my previous life, we saw a product that was those McMansions, so to speak, that were like the 3-4 unit buildings that looked like one home, but it was actually a triplex or a quad. So thank you, Nikki, for presenting this. The traditional architecture character, I believe that we spoke to that. The compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood, and I would say compatible and complementary, because we do want a variety of architecture in this area. And the proposed designs harmonious with the different unit types. I think we spoke to that, and Jane kind of summed that up with the last comments made there. And then, of course, the other considerations, namely the front elevations and that detail quality that is hard to articulate, but to Mr. Fishman's comment, you recognize, when you see it, you recognize it. So Mr. Underhill, Mr. Filipkowski, looking back to you to see if you have any clarifying questions or if there are any outstanding items that you want us to speak to.
I will defer to Keith.
No, I really don't. I mean, I know there was a lot of feedback to take in. I need to digest it, but I've got some areas I know I can focus on, some ideas already brewing. Jay and I appreciate the idea of flexibility when it comes to the design, not being so pragmatic as far as following the rules of architectural precedents. You know, for example, like the dormer repetition and location. You know, there's certain rule sets when you look at the history of architecture and how that is supposed to be. At the end of the day, it's using good judgment. So no, I think, you know, I think there was a lot of good feedback tonight, and there's certainly work to do here. But I'm excited for the challenge, and we'll certainly go back with our group and talk more about what's next.
Well, we certainly appreciate your time this evening, and thus far, and Mr. Underhill, we look forward to that end zone.
All right. Thank you all very much.
All right. Just one last item, Nikki, checking you doing my, you know, case by case check-in. Any public comment on this item?
No public comment for this.
Thank you. Seeing you again, and you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, we are going to be entertained this evening. Cases 3 and 4 will be heard together. I will read both cases into the record. This is for Turkey Hill, located at 6201 to 6233 Avery Road. 1CU for a drive-through restaurant conditional use, and 20-162 CU, fueling station and car wash, also conditional use. The first application, 161 CU, is a request for conditional use for construction of a new drive-through restaurant designated as an auto-oriented commercial facility on a roughly 5.5 acre site zoned community commercial district. The second application, 161 CU, is a request for a conditional use for construction of a new fueling station and car wash, also designated as an auto-oriented commercial facility. And Nikki, it looks like we have the pleasure of hearing from you again this evening, so I will turn time over to you for our case presentation.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. As mentioned, this is a request for review and consideration of 2 separate conditional uses, both for a gas station with car wash and a drive-through restaurant. The site in question is located southwest of the intersection of Shire Rings Road and Avery Road. The site is approximately 5 acres in size and presently contains 3 structures and 3 access points, 1 along Shire Rings and 2 along Avery. With this proposed development, the existing structures would be demolished and the access to the site would be modified. It's important to note there is a stream corridor protection zone along the southern side of the site. None of the proposed improvements will be within the bounds of the stream corridor protection zone, and all natural features of that stream corridor are proposed to be preserved. As mentioned, this site is zoned community commercial district, which allows for a variety of permitted and conditional uses. Within this district, auto-oriented commercial facilities are designated as conditional uses. This can range from items like gas stations, car washes, to drive-through restaurants. However, it is important to note that restaurants and retail stores without drive-throughs are permitted in this district. The conditional use review allows the Commission the opportunity to review these uses on a case-by-case basis, recognizing that often these auto-oriented commercial facilities are desirable, although in some cases may more intensely affect the surrounding areas. The conditional use considerations for the gas station and car wash are as follows. The gas station is proposed to have 10 gas pumps with a total of 20 fueling positions. The applicant has met the required vehicle stacking for the gas station use. The hours of operation proposed are 7 days per week, 24 hours per day. The anticipated staffing levels are 50 to 55 employees at opening, and this includes all uses on the site. So car wash, gas station, restaurants, and drive-throughs. This convenience store will contain 2 separate restaurants, only one of the 2 restaurants having a drive-through. The car wash is a single lane car wash with dual lane stacking, each containing 12 vehicle stacking spaces in alignment with the code requirement. The hours of operation for the car wash are more limited, as one attendant will be on site at all times. The conditional use considerations for the drive-through restaurant. As mentioned, restaurants are permitted. However, drive-throughs require additional consideration. The drive-through restaurant circulates around the convenience store in a counterclockwise alignment. There will be one pickup window associated with this drive-through restaurant and one drive-through lane, as well as a bypass lane for emergency services. The applicant is proposing to exceed the required vehicle stacking spaces. This drive-through restaurant will include a menu board, however, will not include a speaker, as the system is proposed to be online ordering. This restaurant will operate 7 days per week and 24 hours per day, and the staffing levels for the convenience store and restaurant are in alignment with the previous discussion. In order to demonstrate that the potential impacts of this use are mitigated, the applicant has provided a site plan for reference as well as architectural character. This site plan and the architectural character, outside of the conditional use criteria reviews, would be eligible to go to building permitting and would typically not be under the purview of the Planning and Zoning Commission, given that this is a standard zoning district and not a planned unit development. That being said, a 7,600 square foot convenience store is proposed along Shire Rings Road, with that drive-through circulating counterclockwise. A total of 60 parking spaces are provided on site in alignment with the code requirements. All associated landscaping for vehicular use areas, as well as screening, tree preservation, and tree replacement, are required to be met and will be reviewed in detail with the building permit. Finally, all signs are required to meet the sign code provisions and will be reviewed with a sign permit through the Building Standards Division. The architecture provided is intended to be compatible with the adjacent West Innovation District, which calls for support services in addition to innovation, light manufacturing, as well as institutional uses like the recently approved OSU Wexner Medical Center. This includes a traditional warm brick with stone, which the applicant has indicated is meant to mimic the aesthetic of the OSU facility. With that, staff has reviewed the conditional use criteria for the gas station and car wash, as well as the separate review of the drive-through restaurant. Staff is recommending approval of the gas station with car wash with 4 conditions. These are that the applicant continue to work with staff on landscape requirements and compliance prior to submittal of building permits, that the applicant comply with all provisions of Chapter 53, which are the stormwater management provisions of the Dublin Code, that the applicant reimburse the city and an infrastructure agreement be considered by City Council. This is an opportunity to reimburse the city, as the city is taking the lead on the University Boulevard project and those intersection modifications. So in lieu of the applicant constructing their own right-of-way and utility improvements, the applicant, at the recommendation of the city engineer, is being asked to reimburse the city. And then finally, that the applicant construct turn lanes in coordination with the city engineer, and that those be conditionally accepted prior to building occupancy. Staff is also recommending approval of the conditional use for the drive-through restaurant, and that is with one condition, that all the conditions of approval associated with the prior conditional use be fulfilled. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I know the applicant team is here as well this evening.
Thank you, Nikki. All right, who do we have from the applicant with us tonight?
I'm sorry, ma'am, was that for me? This is Chris Klein.
Hello, Mr. Klein. If you had a presentation for us tonight, or if you'd like to add any statements after Nikki's.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. I anticipated that the board was going to ask staff questions. I haven't done one of your virtual meetings yet. Yes, we do have a presentation, and I have a complete team with me. And if they could log on and give us your pictures, I'd appreciate it, gentlemen. I'll go ahead and get started. Our EG America Turkey Hill team is headed by Steve Fuller, who's the Vice President of Real Estate Development and Acquisitions for EG America. Manny Pava, who is the Senior Project Manager of EG America. Russell Koenig, who is the Prime Construction Management and Survey Project Manager, basically our engineer. Steve Fox, who is also with Prime Engineering, he covers stormwater and lighting. And Aaron Smith from LK Architecture, who's the senior designer at LK. And we have all those people here today, so we should be able to answer any technical questions that are presented. First of all, I'd like to give Steve Fuller the opportunity to explain to the board who EG America is, because I think they're new to this part of town. Steve?
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, thank you, Chris. And good evening to the board. Thank you, everyone, for your time this evening. And we're excited to be here. So I was born and raised in Columbus up until about a year and a half ago. So very, very familiar with Dublin. And as you know, we have 17 Turkey Hills in and around Columbus. And I was involved with the development or acquisition of all of those. And but we are very excited to be here because we have not yet been able to be a part of the Dublin community. And we're excited to have the potential to be able to do that. Just a real quick history on EG America. So with Turkey Hill, we were part of Kroger, which is who I worked for at the time. And back in 2018, Kroger decided to sell their 762 convenience stores that they had across the country. And EG, our parent company, which is based in Blackburn over in the UK, they purchased those 762 stores. So as a part of that, I transitioned over to EG. And thereafter, EG then made several other acquisitions to the point now where we have 1,700 stores in 31 states across the country at this time. Our headquarters is in Westboro, Massachusetts, 30 miles west of Boston. And EG, our parent company, just to kind of give the leverage of the size, we have over 6,000 stores that we operate in 9 countries. Again, 1,700 of those being in the U.S. We are the 5th largest C-store operator in the U.S. So what that affords us the opportunity to do is to be able to work with municipalities and be flexible. Working with Ms. Martin through this process has been fantastic. And we are truly just excited to bring this before you tonight and hope to get some positive comments from it. So thanks, Chris. With that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And in a moment, I'm going to ask Manny Pava to do a brief operational review of the site. but I had a couple of comments to make first. This site is about 5.5 acres. So in terms of the amount of intensity that we would anticipate in Dublin for office or retail, you'd be looking at 55,000 square feet of buildings. And that's when I say typically, development is obviously constrained by development standards, and that includes setbacks, landscaping, and parking, all of which limit you to basically about 10,000 square feet an acre, and that's typically what we see in Dublin. In terms of our structures here, we are obviously significantly below those, about 10,700 square feet of structure, not counting the fuel dispensing area, which is sort of a different kind of animal. The development standards that we are shown, the site plan demonstrates that the various development standards that are required by the provisions of the city code can be met on the site. To a degree, that's not entirely correct because many of the actual users of this site will be partaking of more than one of the services. For instance, about 85 to 90% of the fuel of the car wash business comes from vehicles that are already on site. Nonetheless, our traffic access study treats all those uses as separate, as if they were totally different customers coming on site. The same thing for the convenience store. Many times the people that use the convenience store will also be there first to utilize the fueling station, or as indicated, the car wash. Hopefully, you've had a chance to look at the plan sheets. There are about 60 plan sheets that have been prepared and submitted, and this indicates the amount of detail that this applicant has brought to the table. This amount of detail is not required by the conditional use. Basically, it's been treated as if it was a PUD in terms of the detail that's been submitted for your review tonight. In all fairness, we would have to do that amount of detail when we went in for a building permit, but we felt it was important to demonstrate to both the staff and to the city, to this commission, that we had the ability with this proposal to meet all of those development standards. And you'll notice from the staff conditions and the staff report, the staff consistently does mention the fact that, yeah, it's nice these guys have presented all this information, but we're going to look at it again when they come in for the building permit. And we respect that fact. I don't think anybody expects that there's going to be significant differences in between what is presented now and what will be presented for the building permit. The last thing I want to mention before I turn it over to Manny is that the development that surrounds this site is some of the oldest legacy zoning regulated development that is present in Dublin. In 1970, the city, actually the village at that point in time, rezoned pretty much everything from Post Road South to this location, the Shire Rings Avery location in the industrial category. And the quadrant, the northwest quadrant of Shire Rings and Avery, just to the north, in fact, was zoned general industrial, which is the most intensive industrial category that is available. And there's still a concrete batch plant located out there in the middle of that. There's only one other general industrial area that was ever existing in Dublin. And also at the same time, contemporaneously anyway, the Washington Township zoned other land that adjoined here to restricted industrial. So the development around the site right now is reflective of that industrial character, and the purpose for that zoning was that Interstate 270 was coming around, and the city fathers, boy, that's probably not the correct thing to say anymore. The community leaders at that point in time thought it was important to set aside the future breadbasket of the Dublin of the new Dublin that was to be, and they envisioned that breadbasket was industrial development. And so that's why all this industrial was zoned. Obviously, as we fit in quite acceptably with that legacy development, but we anticipate that new development is going to take place, and the OSU hospital is a good example of that. And we anticipate that that new development that is likely to occur around us is something that will have even more need of the services that this site will provide. One other little point to mention is that Nikki mentioned the infrastructure agreement. Right now the site is served by an 8-inch sewer that was brought up from the larger line just to the south along the west side of Avery Road, and it stops sort of towards about 2/3 of the way south on the site. And the city desires to have that 8-inch line extended to the north because it's my understanding from looking at the maps and the plans that former general industrial site to the north that I mentioned does not have any sanitary sewer, and obviously that greatly limits its developability. So by bringing this 8-inch sewer line to the north, which doesn't serve our project, but we've agreed to pay the city for it, and the number is probably going to be a bit higher than the $32,000 that was mentioned in the condition. That we have also agreed to that higher amount. So we're effectively opening up that site to the north for development by bringing the sewer across our land to the manhole, which we'll also construct on the south side of Shire Rings Road. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Manny Pava, who can give you just a brief operational overview of how the site functions.
Thank you, Chris. My name again, for the record, is Manny Pava. I'm a senior planning project manager with EG. And Nikki, if you could open up the site plan so everyone can look at that as I describe the operations and the circulation of the site, please. Thank you very much. So as Nikki mentioned in her first portion of the presentation, is currently served by 3 curb cuts or 3 driveways to this site. Under the final development, we're going to go down to 2, and the 2 driveways will be pushed as far away from the intersection on both Shire Rings and Avery. The Shire Rings curb cut will be controlled as a right in, right out only, and the Avery Road one will be relocated as far south to line directly across the street with the curb cut on the adjacent property. What we're also doing, if you take note on that Avery Road, as you come southbound from the intersection, we're creating a turn pocket. So anyone coming south has a safe off the road turn pocket to take a left into the site. And if you're coming northbound on Avery Road, we're extending the existing median coming north, so you again create a left turn pocket for someone to safely sit in that center lane, if you would, and not and sit you right against it to take your left in. So that explains the 2 access points. On the convenience store, it was mentioned also we'll have 2 food offerings, and the one with the drive-through is a phone order, so it's something new for IHOP. And it's going to be pre-order on your phone, and you just basically go there, you click that you're in line, and they have your food ready, and you go around and pick it up. The menu board, the reason it was made mentioned in the presentation, that there's no speaker because it's a QR code. You put your phone on it, and it's going to bring up the app, and you can order in line. So there's no talking into a speaker. It's just basically snap a picture and go. Inside the C-store, convenience store, there'll be the Turkey Hill for all your convenience store items. There'll be a counter Sbarro pizza. And again, the IHOP is going to be a drive-through type style, and first one for IHOP, and will be it. We'll be designing it. Outside on the gas, we got the 10 gas pumps, and they're spaced so you can reach all of them. between, driving between the aisle or around the aisle. All aisle spaces on the layout was met based on city code, minimum drive lanes. We minimized the pavement as much as we could to maximize the green space around the perimeter. And if you look at the drive-through, as it gets single lane, as you go around, once you make that back bend, there is an escape route or a emergency access road. Or if you wanted to get out of line, you can get out of line and leave. And the car wash, as mentioned, will be manned. So it's going to be a manned unit. So there'll be a clerk or someone at the service door guiding you into the car wash and then following you out. When you leave the car wash, along the side of that car wash, you see there's 10 stalls with vacuums. So as you come out, you can park right against the building and get your vacuum and go. And the underground storage tanks, you can see them angularly indicated just to the left of the gas islands. And that's set up in the most strategic place. So when the gasoline tanker comes from the interstate, south on Avery Road, turns into that right turn pocket, goes straight across the site, parks where he's shown, offloads on his right, and then goes back out to Shire Rings, takes the right, takes the left back to the interstate. So it's a direct route in, safe route out, no turning and twisting in the site. And trying to be as brief as I can. If there's any questions, I could go back to it, but that was a brief overview for Mr. Klein's request. Thank you.
Thank you, Manny. Let me make just a couple more comments, and then we've got everybody on board here to try and answer any questions which the commission may have. You'll notice that if you look at the actual conditional use ordinance, there's a word that comes out. It's called intensity, and shows up in the staff report also. And it's our job to show that any added intensity that is demonstrated by these conditional uses are adequately dealt with. And in this regard, our job is made, and your job, I would suggest, is made easier than it is in a traditional conditional use consideration because of the ordinances that the city has already enacted. So we don't have to wonder, how much stacking should we have here for the drive-through and the fueling stations and for the car wash, because that is spelled out in city code, and we've met those requirements. You look at item number 8 in the considerations by staff. By the way, there's 10 considerations, and those are taken verbatim out of the conditional use ordinance. And number 8 says that the vehicular approaches to the property shall be designed not to create interference with traffic on public or private streets and roads. Well, this condition is met by the detailed traffic access study which we prepared, and which was then vetted and carefully examined by the City of Dublin's traffic engineers. And all of the access into and out of the site meets the appropriate warrants and is approved for appropriate functioning. So I would suggest to you that question about the access, as indicated by the staff recommendation for approval, has been successfully addressed also. And it's funny, it's not something that you think in terms of the developer wanting to do less, but in this case, we were prepared to do a right turn lane off of Shire Rings Road into the site. But the traffic access study indicated that was not necessary and not desired, and the warrants were not met. And so you'll see a straight right turn lane into what's called a pork chop short little median type barrier on the north side. And also, I don't think it was mentioned that the access from Shire Rings Road is only eastbound, and westbound traffic on Shire Rings Road is prohibited by a median from turning into the site from that direction. All in all, we are happy with the amount of access that we've got. And one of the things that I don't think either Steve or Manny mentioned is that with the wide range of experience that this applicant has with these types of facilities. They have a lot of expertise in looking at what is in fact what will work commercially and what makes sense. And they are also pleased that this site can in fact can function. Last thing I'd mentioned is that a lot of times you've got sort of the roller food on the hot dog grill in a convenience store. These are two real live first class food choices with Sbarro and flipped by IHOP. And obviously IHOP's known as a breakfast chain, but they have branched out and they've gone to this flipped direction. And as Manny indicated, you don't have the traditional ordering like in a normal fast food drive-through. All the ordering is done by application, app, either in person. There's a kiosks in the lobby where you can order there, or you go on the website and or the app site and order from your car. That's how it works. And it's not just traditional breakfast food. It's a full service menu, and obviously it'll be available 24 hours a day. And I don't know whether anybody on the board here has ever worked a second or third trick, but such as many of the people in the hospital will. But your ideas as to what tastes good at a particular type of day when you get off work or when you break for your mid-time in the middle of your shift may be different from the folks back at home who are sawing Z's at that point in time. And so, believe it or not, we anticipate that there's going to be good business for the Sbarro at the 7 o'clock opening up in the morning, as well as going on through the night. Obviously, the fuel availability is something that is going to be desirable for travelers and for residents and for people who work here as well. And we think that this is going to be a welcome service facility for a number of reasons. And probably the chief one that we've heard is that people look forward to not having to cross over the freeway to find services, that if you're working or living on the south side of the freeway, that you'll be able to find these services available right there without crossing over the freeway bridge. That's pretty much what we have to say. I think we've got everybody here that can answer any possible questions, or we have people that can demonstrate expertise in any of the areas. Hopefully they can answer your questions. So we'll be available for whoever you would like to put on the spot. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Looking to the commission for questions for staff or the applicant. Hold our comments until a little bit later. Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Ms. Call. It's a question that I think is going to start with Ms. Martin and then go over to Mr. Paya. Nikki, I just want to confirm that I'm reading these drawings right. There is bike path or sidewalk connectivity around the full perimeter, correct?
Yes, existing.
Yes, okay. No additions or modifications are needed necessarily based on the new entryways and whatnot.
There may be some modifications immediately adjacent to the entry, but in large part, they will remain as existing.
Okay, and the reason I asked that is maybe also embedded in a comment, but I live near a corner store and it's kind of a rite of passage for the kids in our neighborhood to be able to ride their bikes down and, get something or pick up a gallon of milk for mom or whatever. And so maybe my follow-up question then is either for Mr. Klein or Mr. Paya, is there any bicycle parking on site? I didn't see any in the drawings. Maybe I'm just overlooking it, but is bicycle parking a consideration right now, or has it been discussed?
I mean, it is not on the plans. It can easily be added. If Nikki pulls up that site plan again, I apologize, Nikki, but there is a connection proposed to that perimeter sidewalk, and we could easily add a bike rack right where it connects across that drive-through lane. So see that walk that continues out right by the entrance of the drive-through, right there.
Yeah.
So on the store side, we could easily add a bike rack right there. So the only crossing that the bike would have to do would be the entrance to the car, to the drive-through, my bad, and safely get right back to the sidewalk.
Good, okay. And again, a bike rack is maybe not a requirement, but just a suggestion. I know how many kids are always biking up to the UDF that I live near, and there's always a huge stack of bikes there. And given the number of neighborhoods that are just south on Avery, I would imagine that you may get some level of bike traffic, but maybe Miss Martin already shared that consideration with your team. I don't know. Just putting it out there as a call out. That was my main question / comment for right now.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Any other questions for the applicant at this time? We will continue on to commission discussion. Mr. Schneer, do you want to kick us off this evening?
I was looking at the map to see the bike path. I mean, at this point, I have none other than I think it's a wonderful project, appropriate. You know, we all talk about personal mobility and less cars, but it's a fact that there are vehicles, and vehicles need fuel, and et cetera, especially with the hospital coming there, the density of people will increase. You know, gas stations, how close are they to, you know, to residential? Well, you know, the residential is far from this site, and I just view it as an improvement. So I congratulate the applicant on the thoroughness and their expertise.
Thank you, Mr. Schneer. Mr. Grimes, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I think it's obvious that you got a deep bench of talent that went into developing this project. I appreciate all this detail. And the site is an outstanding location for this. And I appreciate you working well with the city on the infrastructure, the sewer, and those things that need to get done at this time. I think you're doing this at just the right time for that redevelopment of the university area, University Boulevard. So I thank you for all the hard work you put into this, and all the concern that you're showing for the area, and working with our staff. So I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Mr. Suplak, would you like to go next?
I'm going to pretty much echo Leo. This is, and Lance for that matter, this is a nice project in a very appropriate spot, right? You know, unfortunately, gas stations aren't always the fondest of developments, but this is the right spot for it. It's a lovely corner. It's a welcome addition on that side of the highway. I do echo Christina's commentary about the bikes and just staying conscious of that. It is true that the corner stores around here do get a cluster of bikes and kids coming and going for ice cream or a slice of pie. You'll do a good portion of business back and forth from the people who are down the street in Ballantrae or right around the corner in Ballantrae if you sort of make that part of your shtick. And it's not really asking much of you guys on it, so it'll be a nice. It'll just really embed you guys in the community. So it's good. I give you a lot of credit for thinking through your site logistics on the big heavy truck. It really works nicely. Kudos. My only concern might be I think there's the north facade of the building, and I'm seeing it without the architecture is good for what it is. I'm seeing that north facade without the wealth of landscaping. Your landscaping plan is robust and impressive as well. I'm seeing that side of the building without all the tree coverage that it will have. But right now it's kind of a big empty billboard. So I don't know if there's an opportunity to think through that. Obviously, that's the service side of your program and your floor plan in the building. So you don't really want windows breaking that up. But just stay conscious of that and help it be as even though it's the back of the house, it's facing the primary streets, help it be as lovely as it can, por favor.
Thank you, Mr. Supelak. Mr. Fishman, would you like next? And Warren, just so you know, you are muted and your video is off.
Oh my, okay, there we go. I would echo my fellow commissioners. I think everything was well said. I am glad you're paying special attention to landscaping, since it is a great location for what you're doing, but that won't be industrial around there. That's good, even though it was zoned industrial that many years ago that probably you and I only remember, Chris. But so I'm hoping it looks really nice and really looks like a high-end facility with beautiful landscaping, which it looks like the detail you've given us it will. So I have nothing else to say. I echo my fellow commissioners, and I think it's a great location for what it is.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman. Ms. Fox?
Yes, I also agree that it's a suitable location for Turkey Hill to be there. And I am impressed by the materials that you're using, and I like the layout of the buildings and the fact that you integrated the fuel pumps on the inside, and then they're not highly visible from the roadways. What I would say, though, is that I think this is a very successful spot, will be a very successful spot for Turkey Hill. And because you've integrated restaurants and drive-throughs, and it's well landscaped, and you are at the gateway to the West Innovation District, it's a significant corner. And I think that you appreciate that, but I guess I want to emphasize that. One of the things about the West Innovation District vision is that it's a live, work, play area, and it focuses on walkability. We're trying to retrofit suburbia out here in Dublin, trying to create more density and allow more places, more neighborhoods to be able to reach more services, more restaurants, more coffee shops by walking, by biking, as Christina said. And what I do see is a shared use path and one sidewalk, and I would ask you to look at getting a sidewalk and some pedestrian and bike use from Shire Rings into the property in a safe way. Ballantrae primarily, I think will exit from the Shire, will enter from the Shire Rings area. And it's going to be a very active place for people in walking and biking. So you really need to do that. I agree with Mark. I think the north side of the building, because it faces a major road and it is the entrance into the West Innovation District, even though it's landscaped, needs to have a little love on it. I looked at your interior and I can see that you've got the back of the house, like Mark said, but I noticed that you have a Turkey Hill in Clintonville, and it has some soft touches, whether that's those lights that come down off the arm with a nice little farmhouse shade on them or whatever. You need, and I know it's not under our purview to determine architecture, but under the conditional use, will it be harmonious with and in accordance with the general objectives of the community plan? I would say to you that the community plan asked in this area in the future that it's going to be that walkable use, and it's going to be something that's going to be attracted by people at the pedestrian level. So I would ask you to look at something on that north side to give that a little warmer feel. Even though you're traditionally a gas station convenience store, you're elevating the game here with all these things that you're offering, and you're going to attract pedestrians. So I would ask you to think about that as you finalize your design. And then the only other question I would have is, will it be harmonious with the existing intended character? Gas stations are lit pretty brightly, and I'm sure yours is too. And the designs we get are so very small. Can you explain to me what the lighting style will be like, what the lighting effect on this corner will be like, to kind of give me a sense for, it's 24 hours. So and I know it will be lit, but I'm just wondering, are you doing anything specific to kind of make that attractive lighting?
Let's lateral that to Steve Fox, who's here to talk about lighting and stormwater. So that's in his area. Steve, can you chime in?
Or I can.
Sorry about that.
It's up to you. I got the lighting plan.
Yeah. If you get the lighting plan, you probably have the fixtures. We did not develop the lighting plan. I know that it's within code, and it strictly will be within code, especially when we go for building permits. And I think that, man, do you know what the fixtures were developed from?
Yes. So all of our lighting plans are generated by Red Lennon and Associates out of Cincinnati, Ohio. It's a computer-generated program that complies with whatever the local city ordinance is. This ordinance was to respect 0-foot candles along the property line. So we made sure, again, taking off ambient light, anything that you would have street lights or off-site lighting, we turned that off. And our site, on a minimum, we put the minimum light of fixtures, minimum light of canopy lights to respect your code. It complies 100%. Obviously, that would be, again, checked when it went to the building department. All of the fixtures are full cutoff, so there's no lenses that hang or protrude below the glass or the fixture. And the same thing underneath the gasoline canopy. They're all concealed in the canopy. No lenses or frames protrude below the deck. And they're all LED. So they're not metal halide when you see them, brighten up and it's this big, light, a beehive. These are all LED, full cutoff, hidden in the house. And there is a lighting plan. Again, as both Nikki and Chris explained, we went to the extent of they're almost building permit ready, the plans, because we wanted to get as much of a comprehensive plan set to get the city staff approval before we were in front of the board.
Oh, I appreciate that. And as you can tell, that Dublin has that intention that we don't have so much light that it's glaring for even though you're in a great location for it, it probably would bother too many people. Is connectivity, is adding sidewalks, thinking about the bike connectivity and the pedestrian, and then maybe looking at the north face of that building, is that something you'd be willing to look at and add to the plan?
Yeah, Ms. Fox, this is Chris Klein. And as we've been sitting here, we've got a group text going, so we got comments going back and forth. And so there have been several options that have been suggested that, the faux windows was one of them. Maybe some changes, I don't know what the architectural term is, in terms of the depth of the different facade materials, where some of the, use maybe a bad example, but look at the expanse of the Lowe's building on the south side, you'll see that those kind of techniques have been used. But yes, we can look at that and very, very much have an open mind. And of course, we've got our architect listening, so he's getting it firsthand. And Ms. Fox, also, just with respect to your question about the lighting, there is a detailed lighting plan that shows every, I don't know, like say every 2 feet of the candle power that's hitting the ground, and also the actual fixtures that are to be used are in that lighting plan. So that has already been submitted, and we'll take a step back and review that and make sure we still want to go in that direction to go forward in consideration of your comments.
Thank you. I think really it would be to your benefit. We not having been in the Dublin area, one of the things you'll find is that people walk and bike, and the pedestrian use of all of these facilities is really becoming larger and larger. And if you accommodate it now, if you really think about the pedestrian use, I think that you'll just increase your business there. From the traditional gas station convenience store to a neighborhood gathering spot. So
yeah, I also wanted to mention one more thing, Ms. Fox, that you'd asked about the connectivity through bike path or sidewalk to the east. And there is, I just looked at the site plan. If you look at it, you see that there is in fact a bike path that goes around the east and the north sides of the site. It'll be up to the city to bring a bike path across Avery Road as part of the University Boulevard improvements. So that's off our radar, but I'm assuming that connectivity would be established by the city.
Right. I was just talking about the sidewalks into your entrances so that kids don't have to ride on the driveway in order to, if you have a sidewalk that it's easy for pedestrians. That was my intention.
Yeah, you're likely to get a lot of that bike traffic from Shire Rings. So I think right now the way you have it, that bike traffic has to come all the way around your site and then back in. So the question is, can there also be a sidewalk access connecting to that bike path on Shire Rings to the north?
All right, well, let me, I don't want to step in it here, but the way we designed the site, we had the bike path coming diagonally from the corner down to what would be the southeast corner of the building, and engineering asked us to remove that. So we obviously were willing to do that because that's the way we drew it in the beginning. So maybe we can revisit that issue with city staff, and maybe they would let us put that back in.
Yeah, and Chris, like you said, we had it running diagonal, and I think it was to keep the point clear. Another option to do is, as that drive lane goes in, you could step off the edge of that drive lane by maybe 10 feet for a row of hedges and have that sidewalk run the other way, 90 degrees, straight over to the Shire Rings Road. So it would connect right at that point. It's more linear footage of sidewalk, but instead of the engineering didn't want it running diagonal through there because they're going to be, that's where that sewer connection is going to happen and manholes. We could do that. It's just run another one the other way to satisfy that. And one last thing on the lighting is, when I mentioned how we respected lighting splash and minimum lamps, what we did on that sidewalk, there's pedestrian bollard lamps. So along that sidewalk, they just give a downward light. At about 15 or 20 foot centers, we got 4 bollard lights along there. So that light, as you mentioned, pedestrian and bikes friendly, it would light that up in the dark.
That's a nice touch. Appreciate that. I think staff should work with you about that connectivity. I think that's important in that area.
And we can certainly do that.
Thank you, Nikki. Ms. Kennedy, do you want to tie us out?
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Call. Everyone said all the good stuff. So my only question is, Manny, where are you from? I don't get to hear accents like that in Ohio very often.
My problem is I live close to Providence. So what you're hearing is more of a Rhode Island or a New York accent.
Okay.
It's not Boston. It's Rhode Island. Okay. When I was in the Marine Corps, they nicknamed me New York, and I was like, Boston and New York are like fighting. I'm like, don't call me New York. But that's what it is. It's Rhode Island.
All right, I lost the bet with Miss Call then. I was thinking New York, but thank you for clarifying.
See, she said New York.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much to the applicant for all of your hard work on this. I mean, I'm really excited to have this addition in Dublin. And so I'll leave it at that because of the time, but I'll let Miss Call finish us off. But thank you so much.
So, gentlemen, thank you for spending your evening with us this evening. I think that you heard the call outs, and I appreciate the group text comment about, hey, how can we solve? That was my only call out. As I looked through the application, you know that you went above and beyond as far as what documentation needed to be provided to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And we recognize that level of attention to detail and the level of commitment to the City of Dublin. And so thank you very much. More details we will take any day. The fewer details, we get a little uncomfortable and, on thin ice and that sort of thing. So this allows us to not only see what we're tasked with looking at as far as, does this meet all of the criteria set by the community plan and the city and the items, but it also allows us to see more of the vision for the property into the future. And so, having those the restaurant names and the attention to detail as far as the truck route in and out and the safety of cars turning from the different directions. The right in, right out on Shire Rings, of course, occasionally there are necessary right in, right outs. They're not my favorite thing as a driver, but they are safety protocols. And so being able to speak to not only those, but also how those have been mitigated in areas where they don't pose safety risks. All of those details help us to understand the vision and how much any particular application will benefit the city of Dublin. So for that, we thank you, and we thank you for your patience this evening as we deliberated on not just your case, but all cases, and hope that you can see the same detail. So spirits, and we thank you for your time this evening. With that, Commission, I am looking back to you. First, I will pause and ask staff if any additional public comment or any public comment has come in deliberations on this particular.
Thank you, Ms. Call. I did receive one public comment as part of this during your deliberation, so I will read it for the commission. So it is from Chad Harris. He's at 6151 Avery Road. And he writes, I've been listening to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. I own the property to the south of Cosgray Ditch. My concerns remain about erosion of the ditch. This is a conversation for the City of Dublin as well. There has been no maintenance or upkeep in recent years. In the document for the project, it states stormwater retention will be accomplished through underground storage structures which discharge to Cosgray Ditch. I would like to see this addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Could we task staff with reaching out to the applicant to help them understand what the plan is and how the property, that particular issue with the ditch erosion?
Yeah, this is Michael Hendershot with the engineering division. I can certainly reach out to Chad to address his concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Hendershot. All right, Commission, looking back to you, we are looking for a first motion to approve the conditional use 20-162 for the fueling station and car wash with 4 conditions. Mr. Grimes, I have a first. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Beal.
Mr. Supalack,
Yes.
Ms. Call,
Yes.
Ms. Fox,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes,
Yes.
Mr. Fishman,
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mr. Schneier,
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. Motion 2, the conditional use for the drive-through restaurant. This, I believe, is the building that faces the streetscape that we for, just with the applicant taking into consideration our. I'm looking for a motion for approval.
So move.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Do I have a second?
Second. Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Fishman.
Sorry.
Ms. Beal.
Ms. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mr. Schneier,
Yes.
Ms. Fox,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes,
Yes.
Mr. Fishman,
Yes.
Mr. Supalack,
Yes.
Ms. Call.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Beal. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining with us this evening and your patience in getting through all of these cases. We certainly appreciate, again, that level of detail, and we look forward to welcoming you officially into the city.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You have a good rest of your evening. Ladies and gentlemen, we are getting close to the end of the evening. Our case is temporary signs administrative request code amendment for case 20-098 ADMC. This application is a proposal for amendments to the City of Dublin sign code to comply with all requirements of the U.S. and Ohio constitutional, statutory, and case law decisions requiring that sign regulations remain content neutral. So Jenny and Thad, and say thank you to, what was it, Arizona, New Mexico for the few years ago case law.
Thank you, Ms. Call, and good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all. As you recall, we were before you in October of last year with a round of amendments that the commission had reviewed and provided comments on. And what is before you this evening reflects the modifications that we've made based on your feedback and direction at that October 1st meeting. So I thought I might briefly just go through the minor changes that we made and then open it up, obviously, to any questions or comments before we move forward. We are requesting a recommendation of approval to City Council tonight, if you all feel comfortable with that based on the amendments. So in your documentation, on the first page under the general requirements, we had a minor wording change to strike the word moral from the description. We also made some modifications to the permit submission requirements to align with our current practices. So those are reflected on page 1. And from there, we then made changes on page 8 related to the development period sign. And the commission had requested that we increase the frontage requirements to allow that from 100 feet to 200. So we have made that change as well. And then on page 10, the non-residential for sale for leasing sign, we made a consistent sign size and height requirements regardless of frontage. So we struck a portion of that based on the commission's comments at that October meeting. And then the last part on page 12, which I think was our biggest outstanding issue, was the other temporary signs and wanting to clean that up and clarify those requirements. So you'll see that we have increased the number of those signs to 4. We've modified or just clarified the language related to the size, the height, not allowing illumination, and then the placement, and that's on page 12. Sorry if I didn't say that before. There was the placement discussion had to do with striking the word public from some of those clarifications. So again, happy to talk through.
Pause you. For those, I saw some puzzled looks on the commission members' faces. There are redundant page numbers in the packet. So just to call out that there's a 12 toward the front and there's a 12 toward the back. So as you're puzzling through trying to, but they're repeated.
Okay. Yeah, the definitions probably are paginated similar. Sorry about that. So I'm strictly in the sign ordinance draft. I can go through those again, or if anybody has specific questions, I can talk through that.
Ms. Kennedy.
I just have a small question for you, Jenny. On page 2, under prohibited sign locations, B, in any utility easement. So if I'm a property owner, would I know where my utility easements are?
Typically, those are located on your plat or on your plot plan when you closed on your house. So yes, you should know where those are.
I have no idea where mine are. I mean, I'm just going to say, like, as a standard resident, I mean, if I put out like a political sign or a sign to support a local community event, like, would it be at the edge of my property? Would it be closer? I mean, it depends, I'm sure, is the answer, but I'm sure we could have residents that would potentially mistakenly put them on utility easements. I wanted to know if anyone else caught that or thought that might be.
Yeah, again, I mean, I think you're right. It does depend on your location. Typically, I would say in residential areas, easements are usually to the side and rear of your property where you're maybe not placing these signs. And should that come up, then we would, our enforcement group would talk through that with an individual property owner and help them understand where they could put it. So again, we're pretty collaborative with residents and making sure that they're allowed to have these in the permitted locations. So.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Just one call out in the striking. So page 10, sign regulations, I3, where we eliminate the 4 lots with less than 100 square feet of frontage, the 32 per square foot, all of that information. Looking, Thad, more to you probably, where it has no restrictions essentially in ambiguity enough in that particular call out where we don't say, we don't delineate, frontage or that little tiny properties can have more signs. Essentially what we're looking for is a reduction in clutter. Could this be interpreted for an increase in clutter by striking that? Is there any cleanup that we would need to do to that to accomplish our, goal of less clutter?
Well, I think to that question, because it is limited to one sign per parcel in item I2, and maybe I'm not understanding exactly what your question is driving toward, but otherwise, with language in there, we were just allowing larger signs for bigger lots. Now all lots, whether big or small, get only one sign, and it can only be of the smaller size. So I think with the language as proposed, we will see a lack of a reduction in visual clutter based on size of signs, even if not in number of signs, because we still get one sign per parcel.
Got it. And then one piggyback question to that for enforcement. So if this went before City Council tomorrow, I know they don't meet on Fridays, but if it went before City Council in a couple of Mondays and was adopted at that point in time, for the signs that are already erected on some of these parcels, especially those that have multiple signs, what does enforcement look like at that point?
Well, in theory, all of the signs, all of these regulations apply to temporary signs, and the signs that are that have prompted these concerns about visual clutter and distraction to motorists and the like are temporary signs. So the duration issues would be applied. I suspect that there would be an educational component as well to the property owners where these signs are located, saying change is coming. And ultimately, if we did not see the change required by the code, then there would be the enforcement process that starts with a notice of violation letter, goes on through potentially mayor's court or even civil injunction if it came to that.
So as far as duration, when does the clock start? Sign that we know has been up for the last 90 days, and we have a duration, I don't even remember what we ended up nailing down, but we have a duration that, let's say a sign has been up for longer than the duration spelled out by the temporary sign code. Mm-hmm. On the day that it is approved, does the clock start over? Is it looking backwards? What does that look like?
It would start on the effective date of the ordinance. And the reason for that is that ultimately the first enforcement mechanism that would be used would be a filing in the mayor's court, which is a criminal filing, and we cannot retroactively apply a criminal law like that. So you would get a new shot clock with the starting on the effective date of the ordinance.
I can't wait to see shot clock in the minutes, just to be clear. Jenny, quick question while we're sitting there staring at still hopefully I5 on page 10. I guess I'm just going to the language in that duration is, I feel like somebody might have left in a word or omitted a word, or you see it.
I think I see what you're
saying.
There's two fives where it should read such signs shall be permitted for 30 days, striking number of,
yep,
continuously, and no more than 90 in a calendar year.
Yeah, and then by the way, there's 2 number 5s there as well. Just easy fixes.
Okay, we'll make those changes prior to it going to council.
Okay, one more question for you. Can you see my paper here?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
So if you're looking bird's eye down and you see post and post, there's a sign front on the front and there's a sign front on the back. That constitutes one sign, correct? If a user changes that and now has the same number of fronts, but they're on a corner, they have two different street frontages, whatever that looks like, and they pivot. Instead of having two posts that has a front on one side and a front on the back side, they have instead an L-shaped, so they get two frontages. Does this count as two signs? And therefore, if one's 32 square foot and the other's 32 square foot, that is a total of 64. And this one is a total of 32 because it's front, back, and symmetrical. How do we measure this one and how do we measure that one?
So the code addresses, and I'm looking at the language, I want to be accurate about it, talks about where a sign has two or more display faces, the area of all signs shall be included in determining the area unless the two faces are joined back to back and parallel to each other and not more than 24 inches apart. So the code already contemplates how to calculate that. So it should not do what you said. It should be pretty clear.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there separate question on that? So that's really good. I guess I'm going to separate question on that. That's basically, you know, the 24 inches apart is basically, it's on either side of a wall. I feel like we actually had reviewed a case at some point earlier in this on a fin that happened to be, to get the massing right in the architecture, it was bigger than 2 feet. It was happened, I think closer to 4 feet in its massing. Is there merit to us considering that distance? I'm not advocating it, just while it reared its head here.
I think understanding your question, I think we're covered, but could you
Well,
clarify a little further?
I'm floating it back towards my fellow commissioners because it's a case we've seen a few different times.
Yeah, I think that what our concerns were there, I think we're less concerned with the distance between the two signs and more concerned with the parallel to fabricate one sign. So they have to be adjoined to the same thing. And if that mass is 4 foot apart, but one's on the front, one's on the back, I have less concern with that than now I'm going to pivot and they're not parallel. And now I have 32 square foot here and 32 square foot for a total of 64 square foot of sign.
Agreed. But to the point of, she just said, she just said the 24 inches is a limit on us, you know what I mean? And I'm not advocating for us changing because I feel like we actually landed on that 4 foot separation. The nature of the mass still felt like it was just a big, thick wall. So I think we accepted that at the time. I just posing the question to us, are we good leaving it at 24 inches in the code? That 24 inches is a sizable monument sign, if you will.
So from my perspective, I'm good with 24 inches because the applicant always has the option to present a sign plan and to pay for that process of going through the exception because they need the 4 foot, 6 foot, whatever that looks like. I think as far as code, the 24 foot is sufficient for me.
Good
Looking
call.
to the rest of the commission. Okay, I can count. We're good. Jane, did you have a comment?
I did. I wondered if, and I was kind of trying to find it here, whether we addressed drive-through menu boards, because we're seeing them all the time. There's drive-through menu board signs on page 15, top of the page. And I'm wondering if it addresses some of the things that we're seeing coming through with our variances, with, you know, the changing and all that kind of thing. Because if not, I think to do it.
Right. This.
Go ahead, Dad.
This code before you and that we've discussed does not address those with the mind that this is focused on temporary signs and achieving that or reinforcing the READ compliance of the city's temporary sign code. Whereas I believe the prior applications and the context that you're talking about are all permanent sign fixtures. And so we thought that just in keeping with the scope of this project, we would not include that.
I guess I was just confused because in here, you're right, it's under temporary signs, but on the earlier part, I thought it also talked about 153, 157 talks about permanent signs, and I guess we didn't change it, but I just wondered if we needed to really address that so we don't keep getting, it seems a shame to have people come back and pay for a amended development agreement if we know that the technology is advanced to the point that everybody has high-tech menu boards. I mean, I feel like that's a burden to business. So I'm just trying to figure out when we do address it.
So
I
Jenny,
think that maybe that warrants some further discussion on a bigger scale, because some of those are also development text requirements. They're not just a code requirement. So I guess if we can maybe stick with keeping the scope of this, but we could definitely bring that topic forward at a meeting just to discuss and talk through what the various provisions are. Would that be agreeable?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I think that we started, and it must not, perhaps it wasn't in one of these meetings, but just in kicking around ideas, because it is oftentimes a development text issue, whether that can be a minor modification that would be administratively approved or something. But definitely avenues to explore to keep those from recurring as everybody updates their technology. And especially since they've generally been well received in front of the commission.
thank you, Thad and Jenny, for bringing that back to us at a later date. Any other final questions, comments from the commission? Ultimately, I think that staff's done a great job at translating our paper into code. So thank you, Ms. Kennedy.
Final comment, in the era of COVID, where this is the only joy a child can get on their birthday, a yard sign, this passes the litmus test, right? If we go to page 11, section M, item 4, the size requirement is 6 square feet. Does that, I don't know, I'm an engineer, but I'm also not good at spatial visualization and understanding dimensions sometimes. So these kind of birthday and celebration yard signs that are popping up everywhere, would that be greater than 6 square feet per section M, item 4?
Probably,
different
but you get 4. So if you added them all,
Okay.
I'll let Thad weigh in.
What's the protocol? What would be the protocol to enforce on that though? Because there's also those when you order them, they come and go within 24 hours.
That's true. That's true.
That's exactly right. I think from a practical enforcement perspective, there are finite resources that the city has, and so those have to be marshaled to priorities. And likewise, I think in terms of the truly temporary nature of that sign, if it were something that stayed for a period of time and gathered, code enforcement's attention either through a neighbor complaint or through just seeing it on inspections, typically there is an effort to contact the property owner, advise them of the problem. People have multiple opportunities to voluntarily comply before, any kids are hauled into court for their birthday signs.
Now for clarity, and then I'm gonna, put your hat on for a minute. We're not talking about the content of the sign, the fact that it's a birthday sign or a celebration sign. We are talking about the nature of a sign, any sign going up on a residential property for a very short duration of time and then coming down.
That's exactly right. Whether it said happy birthday, whether it said
elect this person.
Exactly.
My roof got replaced by, any of those very temporary in nature signs.
Right.
All right. Any final comments? Okay. Thank you for your endurance this evening. This was a fun-filled evening. And so, we plowed through this on this final item, temporary signs. Staff, the touch base, any public comment during our discussion?
No, we have no public comment at this time.
Okay, fantastic. Leo, did I hear something from you?
I was just gonna say, you want one more motion, don't you?
I sure do.
So move.
Thank you, Leo. Do I have a second? Ms. Kennedy. Ms. Beal, you want to round us out this evening?
Yes, Mr. Fishman,
Yes.
Ms. Fox,
Yes.
Ms. Call,
Yes.
Mr. Supalack,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes,
Yes.
Mr. Schneider, Ms. Kennedy.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. Staff, do we have any communications this evening?
I do not have any communications at this point. Thank you all again for your hard work on that code amendment. Appreciate that. So, but no, I have nothing further. So,
Commission, any communications from the commission? I just say thank you. It's always a pleasure working with each of you, and I learn from you every day. So thanks for teaching me. Everybody have a great evening. We'll see you next time.
You too. Great job. Great job.
Hey, thanks, everybody.